Chapter 26. The distance from the survivor base to H City wasn't close. It would take more than a day to get there by train. Plus, they were driving off-road vehicles, so they had to stop every now and then. For the sake of safety, they couldn't use the highways and ordinary roads that usually had a lot of traffic, because there would be a lot of ownerless cars and zombie car owners on them. The more remote the road was, the safer it was to the countryside. So Xiao Qing and the others decisively chose to take the small road, but it also lengthened the journey. After leaving the survivor base, the first intersection led to the highway and the other led to the small road. Gu Panpan, who was in charge of driving, decisively turned right to the small road. As a chatterbox, Gu Panpan had already sold out Gu Chuan along the way. "Sister Qing, do you know what facial paralysis is?" Xiao Qing glanced at Gu Chuan and silently swallowed back the words. "Isn't there a facial paralysis sitting next to you?" Gu Panpan didn't wait for Xiao Qing to answer and said to herself, "In fact, facial paralysis means slow reaction time, stiff face, and face blindness. My brother is like that. When I first met him, people said my brother was cold and aloof, but in fact, he is slow reaction time and face blindness." Ha 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 ha. Xiao Qing glanced at Gu Chuan again. Probably because he was embarrassed, his ears had quietly turned red. Then she heard Gu Panpan continue, "My brother is not only slow reaction time and face blindness, but also has a poor sense of direction. He actually gets lost near his own home. Ha 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 ha. My mother always said that in the future, she should find a girl with a good sense of direction to marry my brother. Otherwise, the husband and wife will get lost on the other side of the world." As she spoke, Gu Panpan's mood suddenly dropped. Probably because she thought of her mother, Xiao Qing didn't know what to say. The atmosphere in the car was a bit sad. Xiao Qing was the worst at dealing with this kind of situation. She quickly changed the topic. "Look at what's in front of us." Gu Panpan looked ahead and almost lost control of herself. It turned out that there was a woman who looked to be in her 20s and was dressed rather skimpily in front of her. Gu Panpan slammed on the brakes. The car stopped a few centimeters away from the woman. Then they heard the woman's pitiful voice say, "Big brother, big sister, can you do me a favor and give me a ride?" The weather in the post-apocalyptic world was very unpredictable. It could be snowing one second and hail the next. The only thing that could not be seen was probably the sun. It was gloomy all day long, sometimes cold, sometimes hot. At this moment, the north wind was blowing, but the woman was only wearing a small camisole and shorts. Her fair arms and legs were exposed. She was quite good-looking, with delicate facial features and long hair. She was shivering in the cold, and she looked quite pitiful. However, Gu Panpan's expression turned cold. She took out a metal rod from the car and snapped it in half like she was breaking ice. She then sneered, "Get lost. You want to play this game with me? Are you blind?" The woman's face turned pale. Seeing Gu Panpan step on the gas, she hurriedly moved aside. Then Gu Panpan sped away. As they walked, Gu Panpan explained to Xiao Qing, "Big sister Qing, don't be fooled by her pitiful appearance. In fact, it's all a lie. She specializes in deceiving ordinary men with impure thoughts. As long as you dare to open the car door, the men lying in ambush on both sides will rush up and pull you out of the car. If you're lucky, you'll leave all your belongings behind and walk away naked. If you're unlucky, you'll lose your life." Xiao Qing looked in the rearview mirror. Sure enough, she saw a few strong men holding knives and sticks appear beside the angry woman. However, they only deceive those perverted men and those who are truly kind. For someone with a high IQ like me, I can see through it at a glance. Gu Panpan said proudly. Gu Chuan probably wanted to take revenge on Gu Panpan for exposing his secret. It was rare for him to say a long sentence. Then who was the one who was deceived and almost had their car stolen? Gu Panpan immediately blushed and pouted, "Brother." Xiao Qing couldn't help but laugh. One of the reasons she was willing to be friends with Gu Panpan and his sister was probably because their friendship was too enviable. After all, in the apocalypse, not to mention siblings, even father, son, mother, and daughter might fall out with each other. It was a blessing to have a brother and sister who supported each other in the apocalypse. This made Xiao Qing think of Mu Lin, the careless girl who treated her well from the bottom of her heart. It could be said that Xiao Qing's life was actually a failure. She was abandoned when she was born. She relied on herself to enter the military academy and entered the army. However, she was discharged due to injury. She fell in love with a man, but in the end, she found out that he was a scum. Her only two blessings were that she met Mu Lin, the girl who grew up with her and truly cared about her. The other was little Baozi, who was a gift from God. Mama, sugar. Xiao Qing was still lamenting when little Baozi, who was nestled in her arms, obediently put the milk candy into Xiao Qing's mouth. Although Xiao Qing didn't need to eat, her heart still felt warm. Just as she thought, little Baozi was indeed the best gift from God. Chapter 27. Let's rest. Gu Panpan looked at her watch and then looked at the bungalow not far away. After the apocalypse, zombies were much more active at night than during the day. Therefore, people with a bit of intelligence would choose to find a safer place to rest at night. Of course, there was another point, that was, paranormals were also human, and they also needed to rest. In this regard, Xiao Qing felt that she still had an advantage. Her body was much more patient than ordinary paranormals, and if she didn't fight for a long time, she would hardly feel tired. In any case, until now, Xiao Qing hadn't found her limit. Without replenishing her energy, 3 hours of sleep was enough for Xiao Qing to maintain her spirit for a whole day. After cleaning up a few wandering zombies, they settled down. The villages here were almost all connected together, one village after another. After the outbreak of the apocalypse, some strong young people and paranormals took some survivors and left. Some established their own small survival bases, some joined other survival bases, and the rest were mostly old, weak, sick, and disabled people waiting to die. She closed the door at home and relied on the stored food and vegetables at home to survive. Every day was a day she could live. When Gu Panpan climbed over the wall, she smelled a rotten smell. She opened the door and saw a highly rotten corpse hanging on the beam. Looking at the clothes and figure, it should be an old man. Gu Panpan was a little bit silent, and called Gu Chuan to put the old man down. The 4 people dug a hole in the yard and buried the old man. This old man should be the kind who was abandoned because of old age, or voluntarily stayed. After eating all the food, he chose to end his life. The 4 people were a little depressed, and they didn't know what to say. They just silently ate the dry food and then prepared to rest. The rotten smell in the house hadn't dispersed yet, so they spread out sleeping bags in the yard. About midnight, a roaring sound came from outside. They were the kind of people who were more alert, so they woke up in an instant and put on their clothes as fast as possible. Yan Honqing quietly climbed over the wall and looked outside. As soon as he looked outside, he was stunned. There were so many zombies that he couldn't see the end, and at the front was an off-road vehicle that was desperately running. Yan Honqing quickly came down from the wall, and asked Xiao Qing to keep quiet. Looking at the scene, he knew that someone had triggered the zombie tide. He didn't know who had triggered so many zombies in the middle of the night. Although Xiao Qing thought that her strength was not bad, even an elephant could be bitten to death by ants, not to mention the difference between her and the zombies was only the difference between a wolf and a dog. Don't make a sound. Xiao Qing put the little bun in Gu Ponpon's arms. I'll go take a look. They wanted to stop him, but Xiao Qing had already jumped over the wall. They all knew that Xiao Qing wasn't stupid. He wouldn't rush into the zombie crowd if he wasn't confident, so they all quieted down. After Xiao Qing went out, she saw the wandering zombie crowd. The off-road vehicle probably ran out of gas, and was surrounded by the swarm of zombies not far away. The glass and everything else was broken. Those zombies didn't seem to see Xiao Qing at all, and continued to wander. Zombies' sense of hearing and smell were particularly sensitive, especially the smell of blood, which was particularly attractive to zombies. Xiao Qing mingled in the middle of a group of zombies, and walked to the off-road vehicle. The off-road vehicle was surrounded by zombies, so it was not easy to squeeze in. Xiao Qing had to hide, so that she wouldn't be stained with rotten flesh and blood. After squeezing her way to the center with great difficulty, Xiao Qing finally saw the scene around the off-road vehicle. The door of the off-road vehicle had been severely deformed and hung there as if it would fall off at the slightest touch. The people inside had all been dragged out, and only white bones with flesh hanging from their corpses were left scattered on the ground. There was no hope. When Xiao Qing was just about to leave, she saw a piece of cloth hanging on the car. It was obviously a cloth bag, but it was torn apart. Several pieces of energy crystals fell under the cloth. Judging by the size, the smallest one was at least level 2. This was a surprise. Those crystals were enough to upgrade her strength by 1 level, and maybe the little bun could also upgrade. Xiao Qing had always believed that the emergence of paranormals was the product of human evolution with the change of the environment. Then what about the end of the evolution? And Xiao Qing also found that zombies were also evolving. The little bun's birth was different from ordinary people. He was born from the dead Xiao Qing's belly. No matter whether it was his body or IQ, he was different from ordinary children. The little bun could also evolve. If the little bun evolved to the end, would he be the same as ordinary people? No matter what, Xiao Qing had to upgrade the little bun. She stretched out her hand to the crystals, and just when her fingertips touched the crystals, there was a sharp sound behind her head. Her years of vigilance allowed her to react quickly. She grabbed the crystal and crawled under the off-road vehicle. The off-road vehicle behind her made a harsh screeching sound. Xiao Qing saw a very strong figure on the other side of the vehicle with the help of the moonlight. His muscular arms had already pierced through the off-road vehicle. More importantly, this person was wearing ragged clothes, and his skin and flesh were in a half-rotten state. He was not a human at all. Chapter 28. Luckily, the chassis of the car was high, or else the one who would be penetrated would be Xiao Qing. She took a deep breath and looked at the strange zombie from head to toe. Its 4 limbs were very uncoordinated, its arms and left leg were very thick, but its right leg seemed to be deformed. It was thinner than the left leg by more than half, causing it to involuntarily limp when it walked. Although it looked a little funny, it didn't change the savage aura on its body. This was definitely an evolved zombie. Xiao Qing carefully observed, then saw that it was fiercely staring at her. She guessed that it wouldn't be kind. It was very likely that it also came for the crystal stones. At this time, a small head poked out from the shoulder of the zombie. It was probably a baby, a dried-up head without any hair. The most obvious thing was probably a pair of black eyes without white, staring at Xiao Qing. Its facial features were all relatively complete, at least it wasn't rotten, but it looked wrinkled, very much like a monkey. The baby zombie hugged the neck of the zombie, its thin body sticking to the back of the zombie, then suddenly screamed with a sharp voice. Xiao Qing wasn't prepared, then felt a buzzing sound in her head, accompanied by pain. It was blank. At this time, the sturdy zombie nimbly jumped up, stepped on the roof of the off-road car, and crossed over. The roof of the off-road car immediately collapsed. The zombie borrowed the force, and instantly arrived in front of Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing just came back to her senses. Her chest was hit hard, her back hit the ground fiercely. She only felt that her chest was stuffy, and a mouthful of dark red blood spurted out. The baby zombie screamed again. The sturdy zombie madly ran and raised its fist. Xiao Qing tried hard to concentrate, crossed her arms in front of her body, and was hit far away. She almost understood. The baby zombie should be the mastermind. It should be a zombie with a mutated spirit. The sturdy zombie also listened to its orders. Even the zombie tide this time may have been started by it. High-level zombies were very different from ordinary zombies. Ordinary zombies would treat Xiao Qing as one of their own and would not attack. High-level zombies, on the other hand, already had the ability to judge. They would devour their own kind to gain the power to level up. Therefore, when facing Xiao Qing, a high-level zombie, they would have a greater desire to attack. Xiao Qing is now facing this kind of situation. This baby zombie is definitely evolved. Its original goal may be the crystal stones, and now it is ready to take Xiao Qing along the way. If there is only one baby zombie, or only one sturdy variant zombie, Xiao Qing won't be afraid, but the two together, the fighting power is not as simple as 1 + 1. One is responsible for harassing, and the other is responsible for attacking. Xiao Qing wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. She has a premonition. It is estimated that tonight is not going to be spared. thinking about the little bun who lost its mother in the apocalypse, it may soon. Xiao-Qing's heart is angina, she gritted her teeth. When the sharp sound accompanied by the spirit attack sounded again, Xiao-Qing suddenly jumped up. The best defense is to attack, she can't give up even a trace of a chance. Xiao-Qing and the zombie's speed is very fast, quickly colliding with each other. Xiao-Qing fiercely punched the zombie's heart, but it felt like hitting a piece of iron. At the same time the zombie's fist also fell on her body. Xiao-Qing's pain is very low, but she still felt a kind of dull pain. She staggered a step. There is a green brilliance between her hands. Immediately a vine broke through the ground, tied up the zombie's 2 legs. At the same time, she pulled out the dagger on her leg. The tip of the dagger pointed at the baby zombie's head. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. As long as the baby zombie is killed, the big dumb zombie will not be able to do anything. The vine bound the zombie for 2 seconds, then inch by inch, the vine broke inch by inch. Fortunately, Xiao-Qing has already endured the spirit attack of the baby zombie, steadily and accurately stabbing the dagger down. Unfortunately, the big dumb zombie reacted, slightly tilting its shoulder. Xiao-Qing's dagger grazed the baby zombie's head, and stabbed into the big zombie's neck. Xiao-Qing immediately released the dagger, quickly stepped back, but she was still thrown out by the big zombie's arm. The big zombie with a dagger in its neck roared. The big zombie with a dagger in its neck rushed to Xiao-Qing. Xiao-Qing clenched her fist. She can't help but release the man-eating flower. She is ready to use herself as the bait, to make the last gamble. But at this time, suddenly a figure rushed over. He looked up to the sky and roared, like a cannonball, hit the big dumb zombie's body. The big dumb zombie that was rushing to Xiao-Qing was suddenly hit by an unknown object, and suddenly fell into the zombie crowd. Xiao-Qing was stunned. She can't help but look at the figure, that is. Chapter 29. Xiao-Qing didn't know how to describe her feelings. It was probably warm, especially warm. She suddenly understood why she would feel that someone was following her every time she came out. She also understood where the faintly discernible feeling of being watched came from. She named him Dai. It was really a good name. How could there be such a dumb zombie? Yes, the one who was rolling around with the big zombie was Dai. Dai was still wearing the clothes that Xiao-Qing gave him when she left. It was a bit shabby and covered with dust, but there weren't too many bloodstains. He was like an angry male beast. He threw the big zombie to the ground. His sharp nails pierced into the big zombie's shoulder blades. Rotten flesh and black blood flew everywhere during the fight. The baby zombie was very frightened. It kept screaming. But as soon as it screamed, its head was pierced by the dagger. Xiao-Qing fiercely stabbed the dagger down. Then she helped Dai and broke the big zombie's head. They were as tacit as when they were hunting together. It was as if they had never been separated. Xiao-Qing let go of the dagger. She didn't care about the rotten flesh and black blood on the ground. Lying on the ground, she couldn't stop breathing. Dai, who was so fierce just now, threw himself at Xiao-Qing and rubbed against her. Xiao-Qing patted Dai's head. "Don't rub everywhere. Why did you learn to be like a dog?" Dai opened his big eyes. He looked very wronged. He reached out his hand. In his palm, there were 2 huge crystals and a small velvet bag. The crystals came from the 2 zombies that were just killed. The small bag was given to him by Xiao-Qing. The small bag was bulging. It looked like there were more things than when Xiao-Qing gave Dai. Xiao-Qing didn't know what to say. She looked at Dai's pitiful face. She felt sour and bitter in her heart. Dai couldn't speak, but she clearly understood what Dai wanted to say. He didn't want the crystals. He could help her get more crystals. So, don't abandon him. I named you Dai. Are you really stupid? Xiao-Qing poked Dai's head. Dai tilted his head. Xiao-Qing found that Dai's face covered by dirty hair looked fairer. Dai's face didn't rot like a zombie's, but it was pale like a dead person. Now, Dai's face looked much better. Although he still didn't look like a normal person. But at least he looked like a living person. It's not like you can't live without me. Xiao-Qing felt powerless. She closed her arms and hugged Air Dai's cold and stiff body. Why can't you live a free life? I gave you freedom. Why did you come back? Air Dai couldn't speak. He just held Xiao Qing's arm tightly. He was afraid of hurting Xiao Qing, so he didn't dare to use force. He even retracted his sharp nails. He was so careful and afraid that Xiao Qing would run away. Xiao Qing's heart softened. Although she trusted Yan Hongqing, she still had a lot of reservations in her heart. Probably people who were betrayed would be like this. Like the saying goes, once bitten, twice shy. Even the person you love the most could betray you, let alone someone who didn't have any relationship with you. But Air Dai was different. He wasn't a human. He was a zombie. He was like a blank piece of paper. Everything he knew was taught by Xiao Qing. Other than Little Bun, he was the last person who would betray Xiao Qing. After hugging Air Dai for a long time, Xiao Qing picked a few high-quality crystals and forced Air Dai to absorb them. Then she rubbed his head. Air Dai, go. Don't come back. Although Air Dai didn't understand human language, he knew that Xiao Qing wanted to drive him away. Suddenly, he panicked. He remembered the last time Xiao Qing left. He saw her sit in the moving box and leave. He followed her secretly. He knew that Xiao Qing didn't want him anymore. Every time he wanted to get close, he didn't dare to. Until Xiao Qing entered the survivor base. There were many people there. Air Dai didn't dare to get close. He was afraid that if he left, he wouldn't see Xiao Qing when she came out. So he hid around the base and waited. But every time Xiao Qing came out, there was someone beside her. Air Dai remembered that Xiao Qing told him that he couldn't appear beside other people. So he followed her secretly. Until just now, Xiao Qing was in danger. Air Dai was like a child who did something wrong. He hugged Xiao Qing tightly and buried his head in Xiao Qing's arms. Xiao Qing was helpless. But she knew that if she brought Air Dai back to the survivor base, Air Dai would be caught for dissection or killed on the spot. Even if it was for Air Dai's good, she couldn't bring Air Dai back. Let's go back to the zombie crowd. Xiao Qing pushed Air Dai away expressionlessly. She gritted her teeth and said, "Don't show up in front of me again, okay?" Chapter 30. Air Dai stood there in a daze. He didn't know why Xiao Qing was angry, but when he saw Xiao Qing was about to leave, he couldn't help but follow her. Xiao Qing turned around and frowned. "Go back, don't follow me." Air Dai stopped and stood there looking very pitiful. He looked at Xiao Qing walking away step by step, then suddenly he called out in a very low voice. His voice was very weak, as if he was urging her to stay. Xiao Qing always thought that she had a heart of stone, but she couldn't lift her feet anymore. She suddenly began to question whether her actions that she thought were good for Air Dai had hurt Air Dai. She finally couldn't help but turn around and see Air Dai standing in a mess. His clothes were tattered, and he was covered in dust. Xiao Qing could roughly imagine how Air Dai had secretly followed her. The more she thought about it, the sadder Xiao Qing felt. She felt that her decision would hurt Air Dai, even if he was a zombie that didn't know anything. Did zombies have hearts? Did they have feelings? Xiao Qing didn't know, but Air Dai definitely had feelings. Xiao Qing hesitated for a long time, then sighed and turned around. "Follow me, listen to me." Air Dai, who was originally very depressed, roared and directly hung on Xiao Qing's body like an arrow leaving the bow. Xiao Qing caught Air Dai, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, and sighed, "You don't look like a zombie at all, you look like a husky. Stupid, silly, and clingy. Come down." Air Dai was probably afraid that Xiao Qing would change her mind, so he quickly got down from Xiao Qing's body and followed behind Xiao Qing, looking very obedient. "You've become a spirit." Xiao Qing sighed and pulled Air Dai to a nearby ditch. The ditch here was connected to a reservoir, so the ditch was not shallow. Xiao Qing directly took off Air Dai's clothes, stuffed him into the water, and washed him from head to toe. Air Dai was probably afraid that Xiao Qing would leave him, so although he hated water, he was very obedient and didn't move, cooperating with Xiao Qing. After washing Air Dai, Xiao Qing found a set of clean women's clothes for Air Dai to change into. Yes, women's clothes, because in Xiao Qing's inventory, there were only women's clothes and children's clothes. However, although it was women's clothes, it was the kind that was relatively neutral. Air Dai's facial features were very delicate, even delicate. After washing his messy hair, it became soft and obedient. After changing into women's clothes, it didn't look strange at all. Xiao Qing rubbed Air Dai's wet hair, which immediately became a mess. She specially found a black cloak from her inventory and let Air Dai wear it. Don't take off your cloak in front of others, understand? Air Dai nodded obediently, and then Xiao Qing pulled him away. When they returned, the zombie crowd had begun to slowly disperse. Xiao Qing pulled Air Dai back to the house where they were hiding. When they climbed over the wall, they were all vigilant. When they found that it was Xiao Qing, they were relieved. Gu Panpan patted her chest. Sister Qing, you really scared me. You left just like that. There were so many zombies outside. I had goosebumps all over when I saw them. Fortunately, you came back safely. Wait, who is this? Gu Ponpon's eyes fell on Air Dai, who was standing next to her. After washing up and changing into new clothes, she really looked like a delicate and beautiful girl. My cousin. He is a mute. When he was young, he had a high fever. He was injected with injections and hormones in the hospital. Later, he lost his voice. He is a little silly. When I went out, I found him in the car that was being chased. Xiao Qing coughed and began to fabricate without any pressure. My cousin went to J City with his family. After the apocalypse, I couldn't contact him. I didn't expect to see him here. So, it is your cousin. I thought it was your cousin. Gu Panpan reached out her hand. Hello, cousin. My name is Gu Panpan. Air Dai secretly glanced at Xiao Qing, and then looked at his own claws. The black and gray nails were too conspicuous, so he quickly retracted them. Then he stiffly shook Gu Ponpon's hand, and then quickly retracted his hand. Your cousin is so shy. Gu Panpan glanced at Air Dai and coughed. His clothes are also quite unique. His clothes were torn, so I took mine for him to wear. Xiao Qing coughed twice with her fist against her mouth. She was very weak. Fortunately, little Baozi struggled out of Yan Hanqing's arms, and then he ran into Air Dai's arms. Air Dai quickly caught little Baozi. After all, he had been a nanny many times, so little Baozi and Air Dai were very familiar with each other. It should be said that little Baozi was very familiar with bullying Air Dai. After little Baozi ran into Air Dai's arms, he skillfully occupied Air Dai's arms. Little Baozi's interruption eased the atmosphere, and they accepted Air Dai. Xiao Qing breathed a sigh of relief. When she turned her head, she saw Yan Hanqing standing behind her. His eyes were gentle. You are back. Xiao Qing was about to say something, but her vision went dark. She saw Air Dai in front of her as if he was protecting his food. He looked at Yan Hanqing fiercely. Chapter 31. He's one of us. Xiao Qing rubbed Air Dai's head. Air Dai was originally fiercely staring at Yan Hanqing, but after being touched by Xiao Qing, the zombie's eyes softened. But he looked a little depressed. Yan Hanqing glanced at Air Dai and suppressed the doubts in his heart. His intuition was very accurate, and it had saved him many times. Just now, his intuition told him that the young man in front of him, who was dressed in female clothes and looked pale as if he had been sick for a long time, was very dangerous. Yan Hanqing believed in his intuition, but he still couldn't help but look at the young man in the cloak. He was thin, just like a girl. When they came back, it was still dark. The group of people rested for a while before they started to heat up the food. As soon as they started to heat up the food, Xiao Qing's heart suddenly jumped. Oh no, she forgot that Dummy was also a zombie and didn't need to eat. The digestive system of zombies was probably completely different from that of human beings. Human beings would feel nauseous when they ate raw meat, while zombies would also feel nauseous when they ate cooked food. If Air Dai didn't eat, he would probably be discovered by others. If Dai ate, he had to overcome his natural instincts. Xiao Qing was in a mess. The food was already heated up, and Gu Pan Pan enthusiastically handed some to Dai. She was very considerate of Xiao Qing's cousin. Then Dai began to eat the food obediently. Xiao Qing's maternal instinct immediately flared up, and her Dai was so obedient. Dai quickly finished a piece of food, and then when Gu Pan Pan handed him more, he waved his hand and didn't want it. Gu Pan Pan couldn't help but say, "Why did you eat so little? You eat even less than a girl. You need to eat more to get better." Dai just stared at her blankly. Because of the stiff muscles on his white face, there was no expression on his face. He looked very stupefied. However, this was a world that looked at faces. Dai had good facial features, so his stupefied expression looked more adorable. Xiao Qing didn't want Dai to suffer more. She quickly pulled Gu Pan Pan and said, "His stomach is not good. He will vomit if he eats too much. That's why he has been so thin. So pitiful." Gu Pan Pan looked at Dai lovingly. Dai couldn't help but shrink back. Dai had been living among the zombies for a long time, and it was the first time he came into contact with a living person other than Xiao Qing. Although it was only for a few minutes, Dai still had the urge to leave. Passionate humans are so scary. Sob sob. If it weren't for Xiao Qing, Dai would have already run into the zombies. After breakfast, everyone packed up and prepared to leave. During this time, Xiao Qing dragged Dai to the back of the house. The two of them vomited for a long time. They vomited out what they had eaten. This was one of the sorrows of zombies. They couldn't digest normal food, unlike little Bowsy, who could eat a small amount of highly nutritious food without any additives. Even when they ate, they only chewed mechanically. They couldn't taste anything. It was a tragedy. After leaving the house, they found that most of the zombies had dispersed. There were only a few zombies wandering around the off-road vehicle. Since Dai came, Xiao Qing let Dai hug little Bowsy and be a clean wallflower in the car. They cleaned up outside. After cleaning up the wandering zombies, Xiao Qing and the others started to hurry. Because they only had time during the day, they had to rush to their destination at full speed. After the outbreak of the apocalypse, the world's population dropped by 2/3. This didn't include the people who died in the zombies' mouths. And now, there were a large number of people dying every day. They died from hunger, zombies, and even humans. Especially in China, because of the dense population, the death rate was much higher than in Australia, which was a sparsely populated country. So in such a remote place, there were only a few people. Most of them were wandering zombies. Xiao Qing sat in the front passenger seat and observed carefully. After the apocalypse, many plants had mutated. Some had evolved to attack, and some were beneficial to humans. For example, the bread tree had fruits that looked like coconut shells. After the fruit was opened, the juice would condense into a rice cake. It tasted sweet and didn't stick to the teeth. There were also some plants that were originally medicinal. The effect was particularly good. They could quickly stop bleeding. In short, it was convenient for many people. Every time Xiao Qing observed a useful plant, she would get out of the car to collect it. She also wanted to subdue a second plant for her use. After all, these plants were very useful. Her man-eating flower was particularly strong. It could increase her strength by a lot. Xiao Qing was now at level 2, so she could subdue 2 plants. Her choice for the second plant was inclined towards healing or enhancement. Although this kind of plant had no effect on zombies, it could increase her importance in a team. Ordinary zombies wouldn't attack Xiao Qing. This gave Xiao Qing a lot of convenience. It also made zombies her number one enemy. Soon, Xiao Qing and the others arrived at another town. This was a county town. Originally, it was the kind of town that was particularly prosperous. The population was more than a small city. However, after the apocalypse, people had either died or fled, so it became desolate. It was said that some survivors built a small survivor base not far from the county town. Xiao Qing and the others came for this base. It's not far ahead. We can rest here and exchange some things we need. It will be very beneficial for the rest of the journey. Let's go. Gu Pan Pan said excitedly. Many paranormals or ordinary people who were far away from their own survivor bases would choose to go to a certain survivor base to trade some things they needed and rest in the place provided by the survivor base. The survivor bases could also recruit them. It was a kind of unspoken rule. Xiao Qing and the others prepared to rest in the base before continuing on their journey. After all, they didn't need to worry about external things and could rest for a while in the survivor base. Soon, Xiao Qing and the others saw the small survivor base. The wall was not high. It was not only smaller than Xiao Qing's base, but also looked much worse. There were special gatekeepers at the gate. They received people coming in and out. When the zombies besieged the city, they relied on them to send out the alarm. That's great. We have hot baths and soup to eat. Gu Pan Pan said excitedly. Xiao Qing, on the other hand, was rather calm. She lifted her chin and said, "Let's go." It was easy to talk about lodging. Xiao Qing and the others showed the symbol of their base and quickly got the qualification to enter the base. As soon as they entered the base, Gu Pan Pan's face darkened. "I don't like it here." Chapter 32. When Gu Pan Pan woke up, she was filled with so much energy that she almost moaned out loud. When she pushed open the door and entered the living room, she found that her older brother was already sitting there. Beside him was Xiao Qing, who had a bruised lip, Yan Hanqing, who had dark circles under his eyes, Dumbo, who was glaring fiercely at Yan Hanqing, and little Baozi, who was sleeping soundly in Xiao Qing's arms. Gu Pan Pan couldn't help but ask, "Sister Qing, what happened between you and Brother Qing?" "Nothing, we just learned from each other." Xiao Qing cut a piece of apple with a toothpick and handed it to Gu Pan Pan. "Are you hungry? Do you want to eat something first before we go shopping?" Gu Pan Pan took a bite of the apple and said vaguely, "Brother, are you hungry?" Gu Chuan nodded. Gu Pan Pan said, "Maybe it's because I just leveled up and used up too much energy. I'm a little hungry too." "I'm going to cook." Xiao Qing got up and walked to the kitchen. Yan Hanqing immediately followed. "I'll help." Xiao Qing and Yan Hanqing's cooking skills were not bad. The two of them worked together and cooked quickly. After eating their fill, the group prepared to stroll around and see if they could trade for the things they needed. Due to the apocalypse, currencies such as RMB had become nothing more than scrap paper. Most of the people used barter to do business. It was estimated that once things stabilized, the higher-ups would definitely introduce a fixed currency for future transactions between the bases and to stabilize the lives of the people. Xiao Qing guessed that this currency was most likely zombie nuclei. After all, paranormals needed nuclei to level up. If they trained by themselves, they would not be able to level up even in 8 lifetimes. Moreover, the nuclei were small and portable, so they were very suitable as currency. By now, someone must have discovered the zombie crystal nucleus, but the number of people who discovered it was definitely not many. Moreover, most people's mentality was that they had discovered it, but they couldn't tell others. Even if they wanted to tell others, they had to wait until their strength had increased to a level that others could only dream of. When zombie nuclei were discovered, the strength of human paranormals would increase rapidly. Currently, most paranormals were still at level 1. Level 2 paranormals were pitifully few, and level 3 paranormals were almost unheard of. They might be able to win against a small number of zombies, but it would be difficult to explore a big city. Xiao Qing and the others arrived at the base's trading market. It was called a trading market, but in fact, it was a street filled with stalls on both sides of the road. There were all kinds of stalls, gold jewelry, luxury goods, all kinds of clothes, sharp weapons like daggers, machetes, and a few guns. Most of the guns were pistols, but there were also a few submachine guns. Looking at the models, they were probably taken from the police station. There was even a stall owner selling a little girl. The little girl was about 12 or 13 years old. She was wearing a very old flowery dress and her eyes were a little dull. However, her appearance was very pure and cute, especially her big almond eyes, long eyelashes, and pink and tender skin. When she grew up, she would definitely be a beauty. When Xiao Qing and the others passed by, the stall owner was very enthusiastic to sell the little girl to them. She's still a virgin. You can take her away for only 50 pounds of rice. You can beat her or scold her. She'll be absolutely obedient. Gu Pan Pan suddenly frowned. She wanted to beat the stall owner, but she remembered that this was someone else's base, so she held back. She couldn't help but say sarcastically, "Is your conscience eaten by a dog to do such a thing? This is my daughter. What didn't I give her when she was growing up? Now it's time for her to repay me," the stall owner said matter-of-factly. Gu Pan Pan was very angry. She couldn't help but look at Xiao Qing for help. Xiao Qing also frowned. 50 pounds of rice was nothing to her, but the key was what would happen after she bought the little girl. They were about to leave this base, and there would be a lot of danger along the way. This little girl seemed to have some problems with her IQ, and she was only 12 or 13 years old. Bringing her along would be like bringing a big burden. She had teammates now, so she had to think for them. If she bought the little girl and set her free, in such a base, the little girl's final fate would probably be to become one of the women they saw when they first entered the base. She would be even worse. After all, she had no ability to protect herself. Gu Pan Pan also understood this. She hesitated, looking at Xiao Qing and Gu Chuan pitifully. She was only 23 years old. She was young and emotional. If she saw this little girl being sold and abused, she would definitely be traumatized. Xiao Qing also didn't know what to do. Just as they were hesitating, a balding middle-aged man walked over. His eyes were obscene and lewd. When he glanced at Xiao Qing and Gu Pan Pan, it was as if he could see through their clothes and see their private parts. Xiao Qing wanted to dig out his eyeballs and step on them like bubbles. He was talking to the stall owner, but he was looking at Xiao Qing. "How much is this little girl?" The stall owner hurriedly said, 50 pounds of rice. The man sighed. "That's a little expensive. She's such a big girl, and she looks very weak. She might break after a few rounds. It's not worth it, not worth it." The stall owner hurriedly stretched out his fingers. "We're all honest people. 30 pounds. Definitely not less." The man probably wanted to bargain, but then he heard Xiao Qing's faint voice. 30 pounds. I'll take her away." Chapter 33. "Hey, what do you want? I saw her first." The balding man took a step forward. When he saw that there were several people behind Xiao Qing, he was terrified. However, his lust overcame everything. He straightened his neck and said, "What? Are you going to be unreasonable?" Xiao Qing didn't even look at him. She just looked at the stall owner and said, 30 pounds. This girl is mine." The stall owner laughed and said, "Why do you want to buy a girl?" Xiao Qing's eyes were very cold. "Do you need me to say it again?" The stall owner swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He had seen many powerful superpowered people and had also met the higher-ups of the base, but he had never seen anyone like Xiao Qing. One look from her was enough to make him feel a chill down his spine. The stall owner had a premonition that if he dared to say another word, this ice-cold woman in front of him would really kill him. "No. No need. 30 pounds. Wait, I negotiated the price with you first," the balding man said anxiously. He liked young girls. The younger they were, the more excited he was. Before the apocalypse, although he liked young girls, he could only secretly fantasize because of the law. He didn't dare to do anything. At most, he would call some underage girls. At the end of the world, the law had become a pile of waste paper. Especially when he had a supernatural ability, some of the things that he didn't dare to do had been satisfied, which made him overflow with excitement. What he liked to do the most was to buy or force young girls who looked like what he wanted to satisfy his unspeakable fetish. This girl was simply the best. She suited his taste too well. Asking him to give up was like cutting off his flesh. Xiao Qing and the others were going to trade, so they brought a lot of things, including food. Xiao Qing took the food and gave it to the stall owner. Then she took the girl's hand and said, we're even. Stop. I saw her first. The Mediterranean man was both anxious and angry. He was anxious because Xiao Qing intervened and took the girl away. He was angry because Xiao Qing ignored him the whole time. Xiao Qing didn't say anything. It was Gu Panpan who made a move. She used her special ability in an instant and possessed King Kong Barbie. Xiao Qing could clearly see that Gu Panpan's shirt was almost torn apart. The shape of his muscles was clearly outlined on his tight clothes. It was simply so strange that it made people speechless. Gu Panpan's fist landed on the defenseless Mediterranean man's head, causing him to fall backwards. Blood flowed out of his nose. Gu Panpan then grabbed one of his legs and threw him to the ground, causing him to fall apart. When he was about to faint, Gu Panpan stretched his neck and returned to his normal size. Mother Kerr, I've been wanting to do it for a long time. What the hell is this? Let's go. Xiao Qing held the little girl's hand. She flicked her finger slightly and a small seed fell on the balding man. Gu Chuan, who was about to move his finger, glanced at Xiao Qing and let go of his hand. This time, there was a big grudge. There was a saying, if you don't remove the roots when you cut the weeds, they'll grow again when the spring breeze blows. How could Xiao Qing leave an unstable factor that might bring danger to them? Because of the little girl, they didn't buy anything else. Instead, they returned to their temporary residence. As soon as they returned, Gu Panpan couldn't help but ask, although I sympathize with her, Sister Qing, is it really okay for us to bring her along? This journey is too dangerous. We can't even guarantee that we can survive. Xiao Qing let the timid little girl sit beside her and said indifferently, I'd rather she die in the mouth of zombies than die in the hands of a wretched old man. Xiao Qing rubbed the little girl's head. There was a trace of tenderness in her eyes. It doesn't matter how she dies. At least she has some dignity. This is the only way I can help her. If we can safely return to the base, we can settle her down there. I can still afford to raise an underage girl. Gu Panpan pursed her lips. It was hard to tell whether she was sad or sad. Xiao Qing was right. In this post-apocalyptic world, they couldn't even protect themselves. How could they help her? They could only try their best to live while they were alive. When they died, they had to die with dignity. That was all. The little girl probably had some problems with her IQ, but she was very dependent on Xiao Qing. She seemed to know that although Xiao Qing looked cold, she was someone who was really good to her. What's your name? Xiao Qing rubbed the little girl's head and asked softly. The little girl blinked her eyes blankly. Finally, she murmured in a weak voice, I'm just a loser. Xiao Qing's eyes became colder. She looked at the little girl's big and dull eyes and said, Call yourself Xiao Tong. Take my surname, okay? The girl, oh no, she should be called Xiao Tong. She nodded and grabbed the corner of Xiao Qing's clothes nervously. Xiao Qing could tell that she was slower than the average person, but she was not mentally retarded. Her brain must have been seriously injured, and one of her nerves was injured, causing her to be slow. She fiddled with Xiao Tong's hair and found that there was an ugly scar. Judging from the shape of the scar, it seemed to be caused by knocking on the corner of a table. It went without saying how the scar came about. In fact, it was a very unwise choice to bring Xiao Tong with them. This was probably the only mercy that Xiao Qing had. She thought that she was a heartless person, but her blood was still boiling. Let's walk around in a while and then leave this place early. Xiao Qing didn't like this base. She didn't like it from the bottom of her heart. No, Sister Qing. Gu Panpan's face was a little ugly. It's going to be a full moon soon. We can't stay in the wild. Full moon? Xiao Qing was stunned. Was there anything special about a full moon? Every time there's a full moon, the zombies will be especially fanatical. Their aggression and five senses will all be heightened. It's even possible for them to form a zombie tide that besieges the base. Moreover, when there's a full moon, it's the peak time for zombies to evolve. There will also be more mutated zombies. Gu Panpan hurriedly explained, so no matter what, we have to stay in the base. Is that so? Xiao Qing hadn't encountered a full moon before. This was the first full moon she encountered after climbing out of the hospital freezer. Xiao Qing couldn't help but think, if the zombies will mutate during the full moon, then what about Erdai? Would there be anything strange with Erdai? What about her and little Baozi? Will something happen to them too? No matter what would happen, she had to be prepared in advance. Especially her, little Baozi, and Erdai's identities couldn't be exposed. Gu Pan and the others could feel at ease to team up with a psychic, but they wouldn't feel at ease to team up with zombies, even if they had experienced a lot. Xiao Qing narrowed her eyes. She hoped that during the full moon, there wouldn't be any strange changes. Chapter 34. After strolling around the market, Yan Hanqing had a submachine gun and a Type 54 pistol in his hands. Most of the domestic police's guns were 9mm police revolvers. This pistol's lethality was simply a pain in the ass. It had an effective range of 50 meters. If it hit a human body from 5 meters away, it would almost be impossible to kill, let alone kill zombies. Compared to the Type 54, 9mm was simply a handgun of a rich family. Yan Hanqing searched around and found a Type 54 pistol in a pile of 9mm guns. In fact, Yan Hanqing was very dissatisfied. He was used to the powerful M500. Turning around and using a Type 54 pistol, he was really not used to it. However, in this kind of environment, to have a gun to defend himself was already very good for him who had no abilities. In addition, Yan Hanqing and Gu Pan each found a field knife. Gu Chuan also exchanged for a folding knife. The biggest gain was probably Xiao Qing. She traded for a mad dog. This mad dog was used as a weapon by the special forces of various countries. Xiao Qing also once had a mad dog, but when she climbed out of the hospital morgue, the set of things on her body was gone. So this time when she got this mad dog, Xiao Qing was simply too happy. At that time, she put the scabbard on the outside of her thigh and carried it with her. In addition to these weapons, they also exchanged for some fresh fruits and vegetables. After all, after being out for so many days, eating dry food every day was unbearable. In the end, Xiao Qing also brought a set of clothes for Xiao Tong. It was a small floral skirt with suspenders. It was very cute. Xiao Qing couldn't give Xiao Tong too much. Probably within her ability, she could only treat her a little better and be a little colder. In other words, if she really encountered any danger, if Xiao Qing had to choose, she would choose to abandon Xiao Tong. Just like she said at the beginning, she couldn't give Xiao Tong anything. In addition to the protection within her ability, she could only give Xiao Tong a dignified death. That was all. When she returned to her residence, Xiao Qing saw that Xiao Tong was doing housework in a floral apron. Her movements were clumsy, but she was also very serious. Her delicate eyebrows were filled with indescribable happiness. Probably in Xiao Tong's eyes, Xiao Qing was a good person. He saved her, didn't abuse her, gave her food, and even gave her a name. Then she had a family again. Everyone in the family was very gentle to her. It was like going from hell to heaven overnight. She didn't know how to express her happiness. The only thing she could do was to clean up the house. As soon as Xiao Qing and Gu Ning came back, Xiao Tong greeted them with bright eyes, but she seldom communicated with others, so she blushed and didn't say a word. Ah Tong is so obedient. Xiao Qing touched Xiao Tong's head and took Xiao Tong to the place where she lived. When she took out the small floral dress, Xiao Tong's bright eyes were even more burning. Every girl would dream of being a princess. Even a tomboy would probably have yearned for small floral patterns and tutu dresses. As for Xiao Tong, the best clothes she had ever worn since she was young were made from her mother's old dresses. She had also yearned for new clothes, but all she got in return was scolding and beating. Is it suitable to wear it? Xiao Qing unfolded the dress. Xiao Tong touched it carefully, but her eyes couldn't help secretly looking at Xiao Qing. It's for you. Wear it. Xiao Qing couldn't help softening her voice and whispering. Xiao Tong dared to take off her old clothes for a long time. Xiao Qing's eyes immediately widened. She saw that there was no skin without scars on Xiao Tong's body. The old scars were all over her thin and white body, from her back to her chest, from her arms to her legs. It was a shocking sight. Xiao Tong happily changed into a pink t-shirt and a suspender skirt. Xiao Qing asked her to sit down, untied her long hair, and braided it into 2 braids. Chapter 35. Xiao Tong looked very beautiful with joy in her eyes and face. Xiao Qing touched her head gently, feeling sad in her heart. "You look like a little princess." She could imagine how hard Xiao Tong's childhood was. Xiao Tong was just like her in the orphanage. She fought for a piece of dessert and a bowl of porridge. As for Xiao Tong, she probably didn't even have the chance to fight back. She was treated as a toy, an object to be bought and sold. Her whole life was full of sorrow. Xiao Tong lifted the hem of her dress and twirled in front of Xiao Qing. She was as happy as a little butterfly. After twirling, she realized what she was doing. She didn't want to look at her clothes and wanted to change into the old ones. All her feelings were written on her face. Xiao Qing couldn't help but throw the old clothes away. "Don't be afraid of getting them dirty. I'll buy you new ones. Wear them. They look good. I like them very much." Xiao Tong was happy again. She was too easy to be satisfied. When Xiao Qing took Xiao Tong out, Yan Hanqing was already cooking. Dai was holding Xiao Bao on the sofa. Xiao Bao kept trying to climb out of Dai's arms to grab the raisins on the table. The green raisins still had water drops on them. They looked fresh and delicious. There were a few red apples beside them, but the skin was a little withered. Gu Pan Pan was cutting the apples into pieces with her new knife, and then putting them on the plate to make a beautiful pattern. In short, the atmosphere in the living room was very good. It didn't look like they were going to have a full moon, which was called the blood moon. The reason why the full moon was called the blood moon was that several small bases had been attacked by zombies during the full moon. The whole bases were slaughtered. 2 days later, a base came to investigate. They found that in the base, apart from zombies, there were only corpses with broken limbs and bones left. So gradually, the full moon was called the blood moon. The base that Xiao Qing and the others were currently in was not considered a large base. The entire base only had about 1,000 people, which was about the size of a medium-sized village. The only good thing was that the base was far away from the dense zombies in the cities and towns. Therefore, even if the blood moon zombies attacked, not too many zombies would approach the base. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. The upper echelons of the base didn't have much to worry about. They had already ordered the base members to reinforce the walls. When Xiao Qing and the others returned from shopping, they saw many members of the base carrying barbed wire fences. They had added another line of defense outside the base. Yan Hanqing made 4 dishes and a soup. His culinary skills were very good, and the few of them ate happily. After the meal, the group ate fruits and chatted while waiting for the arrival of the blood moon. The sky was gloomy both during the day and at night. When the round moon rose, its edges seemed to be dyed red by the strange color of the haze. No wonder it was called the blood moon. The howling of zombies was faintly heard from afar. Xiao Qing sat on the sofa with the little bun between her legs. When the moon rose, Xiao Qing felt that the blood in her body was boiling. However, it was not boiling too much. It was still tolerable. The little bun was rubbing against her legs. It seemed that he was also affected. Dai was the one who was affected the most. He lowered his head and curled into a ball on the sofa. He was very silent. Occasionally, his back would tremble slightly. Xiao Qing looked at the time. It was only 9 o'clock in the evening. She could not help but say, Dai is not feeling well. I will take him back to his room. Remember to call me if you need anything. She carried the little bun on her back and carried Dai in a princess carry. Xiao Tong wanted to follow, but Gu Pan Pan stopped her. Gu Pan Pan stuffed a piece of apple into Xiao Tong's hand. She did not want Xiao Tong to disturb Xiao Qing. When Xiao Qing carried Dai, she saw Dai hiding in the cloak. His face became paler, and his dark eyes seemed to be dyed red by the blood moon. Dai curled up in Xiao Qing's arms. A pair of small canine teeth peeked out of his upper lip. Dai's fangs were different from the zombie's fangs. He only had 2 small canine fangs. He did not look scary at all. Instead, he looked cute. After Xiao Qing brought Dai into the room, Dai seemed to be relieved. He could not help but squeeze himself into Xiao Qing's arms again. His skin already had a strange temperature. Logically speaking, zombies were already a kind of corpse, so their bodies were cold and had no temperature. Dai was the same in normal times, but at this moment, Dai's skin began to heat up slowly. More importantly, Xiao Qing heard the sound of blood boiling from Dai's body. She did not know if it was the sound of his blood boiling or the sound of his pulse beating. She once again realized that zombies might be more and more like humans in the future as they evolved. From their IQ to their appearance. Then, sooner or later, she, Little Bun, and Dai would become no different from normal humans. While she was thinking, Dai suddenly rolled out of her arms. His sharp nails grew out and almost pierced a hole in the bed. Chapter 36. Dai, who had rolled to the ground, was in a very strange state. His pale skin was turning pink at a speed that was visible to the naked eye, and then it was turning dark red. What was even scarier was that Dai's veins were slowly emerging from under his skin. Through the layer of skin, his dark green veins could be seen clearly. They were pulsing slowly and heavily, like squirming earthworms. Xiao Qing could feel a wave of energy spreading from Dai's head to his entire body. The wave of energy gave Xiao Qing a feeling like a delicious delicacy, with an indescribable temptation. This made Xiao Qing have an impulse to stretch out her fingers, pry open his skull, dig out the shiny crystal inside, and swallow it. Fortunately, Xiao Qing's willpower had always been strong, so she was less affected by the full moon than Dai. Little Bun, on the other hand, was similar to Dai. He had already curled up into a ball at the corner of the bed. Slowly, Xiao Qing saw that Dumbo's fingernails turned from black-gray to more than 10 centimeters long to sharp and slender, like the color of ink. Dai bent his fingers, and they easily pierced through the bedding and the bed frame as if they were tofu. The redness in his eyes became more and more intense. Dai weakly curled himself up like a shrimp, and his exposed skin turned crimson. Even the lines formed by the ferocious veins looked like dark green tattoos. Combined with Dai's loose clothes due to his constant struggle, he looked very sexy. Xiao Qing patted her own head. She was probably stupid from the fever. How could she find a zombie sexy? She even had the urge to bite Dai's neck. After about an hour, Dai stopped for a short while. Xiao Qing let out a sigh of relief. She looked at Little Bun, and then at Dai. Her worried heart slowly relaxed. Before she could relax, Gu Pan Pan knocked on the door. "Sister Qing, the zombies are attacking the city." Xiao Qing frowned. She touched Dai's hair and whispered, "Help me look after my son. I'll be back soon." Then, Xiao Qing pulled the door open and left. She didn't know that the moment she left, Dai fell into a frenzy. Little Bun was even more frenzied. Although little Bowsy had always appeared to be smarter than other children, he was still an immature little Bowsy. In terms of self-restraint, he could not compare to Dai. The biggest reason for the zombie riot was actually for flesh and blood. Dai was different, but it was still a zombie. Little Bun was also half human and half zombie. Therefore, when it came to the full moon, the two of them began to be occupied by primitive desires. The full moon was also the time when zombies were most likely to evolve. Therefore, after the full moon, the search teams would often find that the zombie's strength had increased again. Little Bowsy had completely shrunk himself into a ball. His zombie eye was already a dim red. His other ordinary eye was also bloodshot. He needed fresh meat. He craved fresh meat. When it was close to midnight, the full moon hung in the sky. This was the time when the full moon had the greatest effect on zombies. Little Bowsy was already rolling around on the bed. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the door. It seemed that the person outside the door heard the movement inside the room. He tried to open the door, but found that the door was locked from the inside. Soon, a fire inexplicably ignited and burned the door to ashes. Balding walked in with a wretched face. He had a wretched smile on his face. At first glance, he saw Dye, who was facing the wall. Dye's clothes were unbelievably loose. Her round shoulders were as red as the sunset. They were exposed to the air and looked very seductive. Balding wanted to take advantage of the chaos to find Xiao Tong. Now that all the superpowered people were fighting against the zombies, and Xiao Tong had no superpower and was a weak girl, Xiao Qing and the others would definitely not take Xiao Tong with them. Balding had calculated this, so he secretly came here. Unexpectedly, he didn't find Xiao Tong, but found an excellent one. His balding palm slowly rested on Dummy's shoulder. Dummy's hot skin ironed his palm, which felt extraordinarily good. However, before Balding could do anything, the person in front of him suddenly turned over and pressed him under her body. The person in front of him had dark red eyes, sharp fangs, and long and sharp nails. Although the person in front of him didn't have a rotten face, Balding still recognized her at first glance. God, a zombie! The excessive fear made his voice break. He never thought that he would run into a zombie when he was just looking for a girl. It was obvious that this zombie was domesticated. Facing this domesticated Dye, Balding was scared silly. He reached out his hand to push Dye away, but Dye held his wrist with her claws. Her sharp nails directly pierced his wrist. Blood gushed out. The sweet smell made Dye even more jealous. Even little Bowsy, who was in the corner, followed the smell and crawled out. Balding thought, I'll gather too. Amadai. Chapter 37. The red-eyed little bun pounced onto the Mediterranean man's body at lightning speed. It had to be said that little bun was really cute. He was white and tender, with long eyelashes and big eyes. If it weren't for the color of his eyes being as red as blood, he would definitely be able to make all the girls, from little girls to old grannies, burst with maternal love. However, his eyes were red and his nails were sharp. Even when he looked at the Mediterranean man, there was a clear coldness in his eyes. The Mediterranean man was still howling because of the wound on his wrist, but now he was silenced. He opened his eyes wide and looked at Little Bun in fear. When he subconsciously wanted to use his ability, Little Bun had already opened his mouth and moved closer to the Mediterranean man's throat. With one bite, he would be able to break the Mediterranean man's throat and let warm and sweet blood spurt out from his broken throat. Dye quickly grabbed Little Bun and tore him off from the Mediterranean man's body. He really tore him apart because the Mediterranean man's clothes were torn by Little Bun, leaving a few clear bloody marks. Little Bun was thrown onto the bed and bounced on the soft bedding. He then unwillingly jumped up, but Dye pushed him to the ground in the next second. There was only blood flowing out of Little Bun's eyes. He grabbed Dummy's arm with his fingernails piercing into his flesh. His small body kept struggling, and angry voices kept coming out of his throat. Dye was determined not to let Little Bun eat blood. As a zombie, he knew better than anyone that a zombie like Little Bun who had never bitten a human would become like a drug addict after eating blood. He couldn't stop. If he wasn't allowed to eat human flesh and drink human blood for a period of time, he would become weak and suffer as if he was addicted to drugs. Xiao Qing had told him to look after Little Bun, so he wouldn't let Little Bun truly become depraved. While Dye was suppressing Little Bun, the Mediterranean man staggered up from the ground. He was already scared out of his wits. He didn't want to take advantage of the chaos to deal with Dye and Little Bun, so he ran away. Dye roared helplessly. He wanted to kill the Mediterranean man, but he couldn't let go of Little Bun. If the Mediterranean man left, his and Little Bun's identities would be exposed. It wouldn't be good for Xiao Qing. While Dye was at a loss of what to do, the Mediterranean man suddenly shrieked. From Dye's perspective, a bump suddenly appeared on the Mediterranean man's chest. In less than 2 seconds, the bump broke, and vines crawled out of the wound. The vines were stained with blood and pieces of internal organs. Very quickly, countless slender vines drilled out of Mediterranean's body. These snake-like vines easily riddled his body with holes. Mediterranean lay limp at the door. Blood gradually spread out. Little Bun, who was already in a deranged state, directly went berserk. On the other side, Xiaoqing had already arrived at the fence. Through the fence, she could see the densely packed zombies outside the layers of barbed wire. They were relentlessly ramming against the barbed wire. Some parts of the fence were already damaged. After all, no matter how strong the fence was, it couldn't withstand a bunch of senseless zombies ramming into it. At this moment, there were already many people by the fence. Everyone was very nervous. According to past experience, when the sun rose, most of the zombies would gradually disperse. The rest of the zombies wouldn't be a threat. Therefore, as long as they could guard the fence for the night, everything would be fine. However, there were too many zombies outside. Even the group of superpowered people who had experienced hundreds of battles felt numb when they saw this scene. There were several people beside Xiaoqing and the others. Their fingers were trembling as they nodded. Xiaoqing carefully observed the group of ugly zombies outside. Obviously, she found some evolved zombies in the crowd. Evolved zombies were much more powerful than ordinary zombies. Xiaoqing observed that there were definitely a lot of evolved zombies outside, and some of them were very unique. Generally speaking, the most difficult zombies to deal with were not those who looked strong, but children. Children had weak bodies, and generally, they were the first to become zombies after the apocalypse. However, children's bodies evolved the fastest, just like the baby zombie she saw last time. Xiaoqing saw a lot of zombies in the crowd outside. They didn't look easy to deal with. Her worry gradually spread in her heart. The first wave of zombies weren't superpowered people, but ordinary people. Each of them had a gun. After climbing up the wall, they began to shoot. Although it was said that zombies would only die if they were shot in the head, they couldn't stand the fact that they had a lot of bullets. They didn't need to shoot directly. They killed as many zombies as they could. After the first round, Xiaoqing saw that a lot of zombies had fallen outside. Obviously, a large group of zombies had been cleared. However, compared with the total number, this large group was incomparable. Reload. After the order was given, the group of people quickly reloaded the bullets and fired at the outside again. Chapter 38. After 5 rounds of bullets, the ordinary people came down from the top of the wall. At that moment, nearly 1/3 of the zombies outside had been killed. It was a really good result, but the price should be all the bullets of the whole base. Xiaoqing found that several zombies had been secretly eating the crystals left by their own kind. Every time a zombie was killed, they would secretly eat the crystals. Xiaoqing was a little anxious. Those crystals should be enough for her to level up, right? Although she was anxious, Xiaoqing still had a sense of propriety. She only planned to sneak out in the middle of the night to collect some crystals without being discovered. Then, a paranormal from the base came to inform Xiaoqing and the others. All the paranormals were divided into 5 teams, and each team would take turns to patrol for 2 hours. They were responsible for eliminating the zombies near the wall. Xiaoqing and the others were assigned to patrol between 12 and 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. People were relatively sleepy at that time, so it should be safer for Xiaoqing to do something. Xiaoqing calculated for a moment, then looked at the zombies outside with sparkling eyes. The paranormals in the base warned the teams one by one to be careful of those mutant zombies. After that, only one team stayed, and the others went to rest. The base set up a circle of tents near the wall for them to rest, and in case something happened, they could go over and help at any time. When they went to rest, the team leader kept cheering them on. "Just get through tonight, and everything will be fine at dawn." Xiaoqing and the others huddled in the tent, discussing in low voices. "We'll see what happens in the second half of the night. If we have a chance, we'll collect some crystals. Although ordinary zombie crystals are not very effective for us, there are too many crystals outside." Xiaoqing calculated carefully. If they could get some crystals, their strength would be greatly improved. There was a gap between two level 2 paranormals. It was like 1 was within 10, and 9 was within 10. However, the gap between 9 and 1 was already overwhelming. They didn't talk. After all, it was not easy to get food from a bunch of zombies. Xiao Qing lied naturally. I have a special ability that can make zombies think that I'm their companion for a short time, then I won't be attacked. In the second half of the night, when we start patrolling, I'll go out and have a look. They had seen Xiao Qing sneak into the riot of zombies and come back safely with an air die, so they trusted Xiao Qing very much. Be careful. Don't worry. Xiao Qing made an okay gesture and waited for midnight. Soon, it was time for their night shift. In order to solve the problem that year, they were not separated. Instead, they were organized into a group. They stood in a corner and watched the wandering zombies outside the wall. Once a zombie approached, Yan Hanqing would act as a bait and lure it. Then, Gu Chuan would freeze the zombie's legs, Xiao Qing would tie the zombie up, and Gu Panpan would rush forward with a knife to cut the zombie's head open and take away the crystal. The zombie's body was mercilessly abandoned. When it was almost 1 o'clock, they found that no one was approaching. Xiao Qing jumped over the wall and rode on the top of the wall. Xiao Qing chose a place with a lot of zombie corpses to land. After looking around, she began to look for the crystal. The more she looked, the more she found that these zombies were getting smarter. Because many of the corpses on the ground had their heads hollowed out, and the crystal in their heads had been taken away. Just as she thought, humans were evolving, zombies were also evolving. And the speed of evolution was very fast. Whether it was strength, speed, or intelligence, they were all the same. If they continued to evolve, maybe one day, zombies would be able to wear suits and sneak into the crowd and choose delicious humans to eat. When that time comes, they could only rely on guessing to distinguish between humans and zombies. After Xiao Qing came down, she began to collect the crystal while observing. Of course, she observed the mutated zombies hidden in the zombie crowd. There was a female zombie. She didn't know where she found a flower and put it on her head. It was crooked, and together with her highly rotten face and body, it looked particularly scary. There was also a little lowly zombie that was only about 1.34 meters tall. The degree of decomposition was relatively light, and it looked quite cute. It was closer to the skin color of a normal person. Xiao Qing calmly looked at the lowly zombie. She was ready to observe if it was a special existence like her and air die. Then she saw the zombie bare its teeth and fiercely stare at Xiao Qing. After all, Xiao Qing's main task was to collect the crystal. She decided not to waste any more time. When she lowered her head to collect the crystal, the lowly zombie suddenly screamed with a sharp voice, as if to warn Xiao Qing that this was her territory. Chapter 39. Xiao Qing had just taken out a crystal when the little lowly zombie suddenly rushed over. Its speed was so fast that Xiao Qing didn't even have time to prepare before it was already in front of her. However, Xiao Qing's movements were very fast. She kicked the corpse in front of her and directly smashed it on the little lowly zombie. The corpse was instantly torn apart, but it also blocked the little lowly zombie for a moment, giving Xiao Qing time to react. When the little lowly zombie rushed in front of Xiao Qing like an arrow, Xiao Qing had already used one foot to support her momentum and rushed forward. She used her elbow as the tip and collided with the little lowly zombie. The little lowly zombie immediately flew out as if it was hit by a train. It mercilessly hit a tree, and one could clearly hear the sound of bones breaking. However, Xiao Qing only took one step back. Her expression was very indifferent as she stepped forward. Before the little lowly zombie could get up, she grabbed its neck with one hand, clenched her other hand into a fist, and fiercely smashed it down. When the first punch landed, the little lowly zombie's head jerked back, and its neck snapped. Even so, it still opened its mouth and tried to use its fangs to bite Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing expressionlessly pressed down on its neck. Even if the little lowly zombie's nails made 5 bloody holes in her shoulder, she didn't let go. She smashed the little lowly zombie's head into a pile of meat paste. Picking up the crystal in the meat paste, Xiaoqing glanced around. Those restless mutated zombies quietly retreated. She could easily kill the little lowly zombie because the little lowly zombie's mutation was speed, so it was easier to deal with. If those mutated zombies swarmed her, she could only run away and die. After putting away the crystal, Xiaoqing collected some zombie crystals nearby, then returned to the base. After returning, Xiaoqing said to the others seriously, "I think something is wrong. If anything happens, remember to run away immediately. Don't stay for too long." "What happened?" Yan Hanqing's voice was a little hoarse. His gaze fell on Xiaoqing's shoulder, where her clothes were torn, revealing a few bloody holes and her fair skin. "There are a lot of mutated zombies outside, and they are very aggressive. I carefully observed them, and found that the zombies are very orderly, as if they are organized. My intuition is that tonight will not end so easily, so everyone should be careful." Xiaoqing whispered. "Big Sister Qing is right. No matter what happens, we have to be prepared." Gu Panpan nodded. She had already begun to look around for a suitable escape route. Xiaoqing continued, "Once something happens, we will immediately return and leave with Air Dai and the others." Gu Panpan nodded, but before she could speak, she suddenly heard a scream piercing through the sky. "What happened?" Gu Panpan immediately activated her ability, and looked in the direction of the scream. Not far away, a patrol team suddenly became chaotic. A monkey-like creature pushed a person to the ground, and suddenly flesh and blood splattered everywhere. "It's a zombie! How did it get in?" Gu Panpan clenched the military knife in her hand, and said nervously, "It should be a special ability." Xiaoqing also pulled out her military knife, and vigilantly looked outside the wall. As she expected, several large, hairy, and moldy giant zombies rushed towards the first layer of barbed wire. The barbed wire that blocked countless zombies was easily smashed like a bubble. Then, the second layer of protection, the third layer. In just a few seconds, the strange-looking giant zombie rushed to the front of the wall. The wall, which was specially built to resist the zombies, was as fragile as paper. The moment the wall collapsed, Xiaoqing heard a different howl. Then, the group of zombies that were wandering aimlessly rushed over, as if they had heard some order. Xiaoqing said nothing and began to retreat with her teammates. They did not even prepare to resist, because Xiaoqing was very clear that the base was finished. When they quietly retreated, the whole base sounded the alarm. The ability users, who were originally light sleepers, and the ordinary people who had some fighting power, all took out their weapons and ran out. But as soon as they came out, they were stunned. The wall, which was as solid as the Great Wall in their eyes, had several gaps, and the zombies rushed in. They were a little desperate, especially the ordinary people. Ability users were not infected, but the ordinary people, as long as they were scratched or bitten by the zombies, they would be finished. Xiaoqing and Yan Hanqing had quickly returned to their place. As soon as they got back, they smelled the strong smell of blood. Xiaoqing's face changed quickly, and she kicked the door open. She saw the bald man lying in front of the door. Blood spread out under his body, dyeing the floor dark red. Air Dai was curled up on the bed, holding little Bun in his arms. Hearing the sound, Air Dai raised his head, as if he was relieved. There were several wounds on his cheeks, probably caused by little Bun. "Pan Pan, go get Xiao Tong. Let's go." Xiaoqing did not have time to ask any more questions. She grabbed Air Dai, hugged little Bun, and pulled Air Dai out. They had to leave this base. Chapter 40. Xiaoqing paused and patted little Bun's head. "Why are you suddenly talking about your father?" "Because everyone has a father. Tong Tong's father wanted to sell her." Little Bun rolled around in Xiaoqing's arms unhappily. "Is it because my father doesn't want me, so mommy took me away?" "No, it's because we don't want him anymore." Xiaoqing hugged little Bun tighter and said indifferently, "Baby, before you ask a question, you have to make an assumption. For example, the question just now, are you handsome? Are you cute?" Little Bun stared seriously with his big eyes. I'm cool and cute. That's right. Who would be willing to abandon you? Xiao Qing didn't think that her son was narcissistic at all. She also thought that her son was very cute. Little Bowsy immediately nodded his head. That's right. Who would be willing to abandon me? What about Daddy? Is Daddy dead? Xiao Qing didn't intend to lie to Little Bun. She felt that her son had the right to know the truth. Moreover, her son wasn't an ordinary child. She thought about it. With that man's methods, even in the apocalypse, he wouldn't die so easily. She said, he's probably not dead yet. But it's okay. Mommy will personally send him to his death. Little Bun stared with his eyes wide open. Daddy must be a bad guy. He's a bad guy. Xiao Qing patted Little Bun's butt. Go to sleep. While coaxing Little Bun to sleep, Xiao Qing thought that she had overlooked a very big problem. It was said that children from single-parent families would easily grow up to be bad, like drug addicts or delinquents. Especially those who lacked paternal love, they would easily become bad children. Moreover, it was said that children yearned for paternal love. Xiao Qing touched her chin. To be honest, she thought that it would be good to be single for the rest of her life. But now, she felt that even if it was for Little Bun's sake, she had to find another father for him. She had to find someone who treated Little Bun well and didn't mind that she and Little Bun weren't human. It seemed a little difficult. Mama is going to sleep first. Little Bun came up to Xiao Qing and gave her a kiss. Then, he said with a serious face, you'll become an old hag if you sleep too late. Xiao Qing was amused and fell asleep with Little Bun in her arms. The next day, when Xiao Qing woke up, Little Bun and Xiao Qing were still asleep, but Dai woke up early and kept looking at her. Xiao Qing touched her face uneasily, then carefully put the Little Bun on the bed and prepared to brush her teeth and wash her face. Dai followed Xiao Qing like a little tail. During this time, Xiao Qing pressed her to wash her face and brush her teeth. Xiao Qing was ready to go back and have a look. She wanted to cremate those who had not yet turned into zombies, or those who had turned into zombies. She didn't want those who might have been good when they were alive to become monsters after death. It would probably be better to let them return to the earth. She couldn't save them, nor could she help them. The only thing she could do was to release their bodies. Moreover, Yan Hanqing's mother's body was still in the base. After breakfast, the group of people went to the base. They smelled the strong smell of blood from afar. The smell was strong and pungent. There were some scattered zombies wandering around and didn't retreat. They were probably attracted by the smell of blood. Gu Panpan was responsible for clearing the way. Gu Chuan and Yan Hanqing cleaned up the sides. Xiao Qing was responsible for taking her son and the other two who weren't in a good condition to walk forward. When they reached the gate of the base, everyone couldn't help but stop, because the scene in front of them could only be described with one word: shocking. There were zombies and human corpses everywhere. Oh no, it should be zombie corpses and human skeletons. Most of the human corpses had been gnawed until only red meat and bones were left, and small pieces of limbs were left, as well as blood all over the ground. Xiao Qing thought that she probably thought too much. There shouldn't be many people in the base who could turn into zombies, because most of them were eaten by those zombies who never knew what it was like to be full. When Xiao Qing and the others walked into the base, they really had a feeling that they had walked into the Azura field. The ones who were more miserable than ordinary people were probably the people with superpowers. People with superpowers couldn't be infected by zombies, so they were bitten to death or eaten while they were still alive. As for ordinary people, because of their strong bodies, even if they died more quickly and less painfully than people with superpowers. When the group of people walked through the residential area, they began to see scattered zombies. Most of those crippled and missing beginner zombies should have been injured and hiding in the house until the zombie poison took effect. In addition to these, the others rarely turned into zombies. Occasionally, there would be a few zombies, but only a part of their body was left, which probably wasn't eaten completely. Xiao Qing found the off-road vehicle that contained Yan Hanqing's mother, and then let Yan Hanqing drive it out first, and then continued to look around with the others. Finally, they confirmed that there was no living person in the base, and then they began to set fire everywhere. Most of the base was made of tents and wooden houses, so it was easy to burn, and the first place to burn was the tent area. Shao Qing and the others left the base, standing on the high slope outside the base. The whole base, including the broken zombies and the skeletons on the ground, was covered by the raging flames. "Let's go." Shao Qing glanced around, and then found an axe from the off-road vehicle. She had to cut down the trees near the base, because it was easy to cause a fire. Before they went down, a roar suddenly came from the base. Shao Qing turned around, and saw a man covered in flames running out. He looked very tall, and when he ran out, there was a car on the road, which was directly hit by him and sent flying. Shao Qing immediately became vigilant. Her intuition told her that this thing was not a human. As soon as the man rushed out of the base, he ran towards Shao Qing and the others. Gu Pan Pan stamped her foot, and the whole slope trembled. With the help of this stomp, she jumped out and punched the man in the mouth. The man immediately flew back like a cannonball, rolling on the ground several times, and even the fire on his body was extinguished. So hot! Gu Pan Pan shook her hand, and couldn't help blowing on the back of her hand. Shao Qing and the others looked at the man who slowly got up. No, he was definitely not a human, because his skin and flesh had been burned black, revealing the bright red color of his flesh. A pair of red eyes, fiercely staring at Shao Qing and the others. That gaze was like a hungry wolf looking at food. There was saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. Chapter 41. Shao Qing felt that it was neither a human nor a monster. It was just a pile of rotten meat that would shatter into pieces with a single punch. However, Gu Ponpon's probing just now had shown that it was not a pile of rotten meat, but a bone that was hard to chew. Moreover, it was a very ugly bone. Shao Qing watched as the thing got up shakily and stared at them with a fierce gaze. Then, it charged at them at a strange speed. Its speed was so fast that everyone saw it standing there shakily a second ago. In the next second, it had already appeared in front of Shao Qing. Shao Qing twirled the military knife in her hand and quickly stabbed it into the thing's stomach. However, it did not seem to feel anything and continued to charge forward. It almost hit Shao Qing. Yan Hanqing reacted quickly and kicked the thing. Yan Hanqing was very strong, and the thing was kicked backward. Shao Qing had already pulled out the military knife and stabbed it hard into its throat. At this time, Shao Qing was sure that it was indeed a monster. Because its throat was stabbed, it still reached out to grab Shao Qing without feeling anything at all. Gu Pan Pan quickly took over. Then, it was a one-sided beating. The thing was thrown around by Gu Pan Pan like a rag sack. Its arms, legs, and the flesh on its body were thrown everywhere. They fell off like snow, revealing the bones that were dyed red. In the end, Gu Pan Pan swung her hand and the thing fell to the ground. Gu Pan Pan clapped her hands and said, "It can't even withstand a single blow." Then, she was horrified to find that the monster that no longer looked like a human slowly got up again. Even when it got up, charred flesh kept falling off its body. There was even a hole in its stomach. Through the hole, she could see a mess of internal organs. As it moved, intestines slowly flowed out. The intestines hung on its stomach like a ball of string, but it did not feel anything. It shook its head and pounced on Gu Pan Pan. To be honest, Gu Pan Pan had seen more bloody and disgusting scenes, but this scene was the most unacceptable to her. Gu Pan Pan could not help but retreat. She did not want to touch the monster at all. Gu Chuan saved her. The icicles were like hidden weapons that kept hitting the monster's body. Then, more flesh fell off. Shao Qing found that its flesh was like cooked pork ribs. It could easily fall off the bones, but its bones were exceptionally tough. Gu Chuan's icicles did not even leave a mark on its bones. No. Gu Ponpon's face suddenly changed. She quickly held her right hand. The back of her right hand swelled up like a steamed bun. Gu Pan Pan cut it with her knife. Black blood gushed out. "Don't touch it. It's poisonous." Shao Qing could not help but feel a little scared. After all, she had almost hugged the monster. If she had been hugged tightly, who knew if she would have been poisoned? Xiao Qing felt a headache coming on. She released her little flower. The man-eating flower opened its petals and rushed forward, swallowing the monster in one gulp. Then, just when everyone was relieved, the man-eating flower opened its petals again. Like a normal person vomiting, it spat out the monster. Its delicate red petals withered. Its huge corolla shook and spat out black-red chunks of flesh. Along with it, it spat out broken stamens. The stamens, which could secrete a liquid that could digest humans, were corroded black. Only the monster, which was left with only its head and organs and bones, got up again. The flesh on its face was also falling off piece by piece, especially its eyelids. Only 2 rolling eyeballs were left. It was pitch black and only its pupils were left. It looked extremely terrifying. With every step it took, a piece of its organs fell out of its body. Gu Pan Pan could not stand it anymore. She screamed, "Kill it! God, it's so scary!" But they did not know what this thing was. Melee fighters could not touch it, and ranged fighters could not snatch its bones. It was very troublesome. The only good thing was that it did not have any attack power. Just as this thought flashed through Xiao Qing's mind, she saw the ugly monster suddenly open its mouth. A green gas came out of its mouth. The gas spread very quickly. Almost in an instant, it covered everyone. Xiao Qing's vision turned black and she fell to the ground. Gu Chuan and the others were even worse. Black blood began to flow out of their mouths. Xiao Qing's mind flashed. She instantly understood that this monster was most likely a psychic when it was alive. It was a poison-type psychic. In last night's incident, he did not know what happened to it to become like this. When the monster slowly came closer, Xiao Qing discovered a second terrifying fact. The reason why the flesh on its body fell off so easily was because it wasn't its flesh at all. Those were things that it had taken from the bodies of the living or the dead. Chapter 42. For a moment, an indescribable chill spread all over their bodies, because they could see the greed in the monster's naked eyes. The monster was greedy for their flesh and bodies. Xiao Qing curled up her palms. The feeling of powerlessness made her feel indescribably dispirited. Since the end of the world, everything had been too smooth for her. Whether it was the discovery of the secret of the crystal stone, which allowed her to advance ahead of others, or her extraordinary physique, which allowed her to move freely among the zombies, she had unconsciously let down her guard. Otherwise, she would not have been poisoned so easily. Seeing the monster approaching step by step, Xiao Qing felt more and more guilty and decadent. She tried to move her body. Her body was not a living body, so the strange poison dissipated slowly and could not flow with her blood. She should be able to recover in 10 more minutes, but the monster was already in front of her. Xiao Qing was desperate. But at that moment, the monster seemed to have bumped into something and bounced away. Xiao Qing seemed to see a transparent cover vaguely, covering them in the middle. After the monster got up, it walked over again. Then, as Xiao Qing expected, it was bounced away again. Xiao Qing followed the vague energy fluctuation and looked back. She saw Xiao Tong holding the little bun tightly. Her dilated pupils showed some fear. Only her face was getting paler and paler, which showed that she was consuming her strength rapidly. And that faintly discernible fluctuation actually came from Xiao Tong's body. Xiao Tong was probably a psychic. Xiao Qing's first reaction was to speed up her recovery. She knew that Xiao Tong could not hold on for long no matter what happened. Every time the thin cover was hit, it could be seen that the cover trembled violently. Then, the moment the monster was bounced away, the cover would become more transparent. When the monster hit her for the 5th time, Xiao Tong had curled up. She grew up being beaten, so she could endure the pain. But at that time, she could not help but groan in a low voice. The rolling tears were gradually mixed with the color of blood. In the end, they were almost tears of blood. This was the sign of overusing her spiritual power. If her 7 orifices began to bleed, there were only two results. Either her head would explode, or she would become a real idiot. Xiao Qing moved her arms. She had been very tired of her body that did not know fatigue, feelings, or taste, but now she was incomparably grateful that she was different from ordinary people. When the monster came over again, Xiao Qing suddenly stood up. Green vines wrapped around her body in a moment, wrapping her like a green cocoon. Then, Xiao Qing rushed out like a cannonball and directly pushed the monster to the ground. This time, she was fully prepared. The vines isolated her from the monster's body. Only the poisonous smoke could put people down when it came into contact with their skin. She couldn't think of a way at the moment. However, Xiao Qing felt that such a big move could not be casually used. So, Xiao Qing decided to give it a try. Probably because she used too much strength, Xiao Qing and the monster rolled into a ball. Xiao Qing was ruthless. The vines wrapped around her hands were beaten into juice by her continuous punches. The monster's face was also beaten to a pulp by Xiao Qing. In the end, only bones with minced meat and eyeballs were left. Finally, with a crack, the neck bone broke. The whole head tilted back by a wide margin, bending at a 90-degree angle. Xiao Qing kept gasping for breath. She saw the monster slowly push its head with the bones of its hand. With a crack, its head was straightened back. It opened its mouth, and the flesh at the corner of its mouth fell. Then, Xiao Qing punched it again, and it leaned back violently. The tattered monster suddenly trembled. Its skin and flesh began to melt, turning into a pool of black and red liquid that flowed down. When Xiao Qing touched the liquid, the vines on her body were quickly corroded. At this time, Xiao Qing could only leave its body and retreat to the side. The liquid that flowed down from the monster's body quickly corroded the ground. The monster moved its bony fingers, making cracking sounds. Its whole body only had one eyeball left in its eye socket. The other eyeball was hanging out of its eye socket. The monster's bony face did not have any expression, but Xiao Qing felt that it was smiling strangely. In the next second, it suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing only had time to cross her arms in front of her chest. The bony fingers turned into claws and pierced into Xiao Qing's arm, tearing off a large piece of flesh. Dai, who was standing at the side, roared and rushed forward. He knocked the monster away like a cannonball. "Be careful!" Xiao Qing's eyes widened, but it was too late to stop him. She could only watch as the skeleton's claws pierced through Dai's abdomen and came out from his back. Even so, Dai was still holding the skeleton fiercely. His sharp nails pierced into the back of the skeleton's neck. Chapter 43. Dai was really like a cornered wolf. He grabbed the back of the monster's neck and kept hitting the monster's face with his forehead. When the monster tried to pull its hand out of his abdomen, Dai reached out and grabbed its arm, not letting it go. But the monster was too strong. Dai couldn't hold it down. After his abdomen was pierced by the monster's arm, he was easily lifted over the monster's head. Xiao Qing could hear the screeching sound of his fingernails rubbing against the monster's bones. Then Dai's body was thrown out. Even with a big hole in his abdomen and his body almost falling apart, Dai dragged his broken body and desperately crawled towards Xiao Qing. Dai didn't know when he regained his consciousness. He just suddenly woke up one day and found that something was different about him. Then, before he followed his companions to hunt for humans, he met Xiao Qing. Dai's intuition told him that Xiao Qing was his companion. But Xiao Qing was different from all his companions. She looked different from those ugly zombies. Dai couldn't help but follow her. Then he was caught by Xiao Qing. Dai was prepared to be eaten by Xiao Qing. After all, it was normal for zombies to dig out each other's crystals and eat them. But Xiao Qing didn't. She gave him food, crystals, and gave him a name. It made him feel that he had regained something he had lost. At that time, Dai only thought that Xiao Qing was very beautiful. He wanted to follow her forever and protect her. So, even if he died again, it didn't matter. As long as she was well, it was fine. Xiao Qing looked at Dummy, who was crawling over little by little, and then looked at the seemingly indestructible monster. She slowly took out 2 crystal stones from the space. One was of the Thunder system, and the other was of the Earth system. She had never used them. The moment she absorbed the energy from the crystals, the energy in her body would surge. That was her chance. Even if she died or became disabled, Xiao Qing had to do it. She had no other choice. When she joined the army, the instructor asked her why she chose to be a Special Forces soldier. Xiao Qing said it was because she wanted to protect someone. But now, she still wanted to protect those people. But those people were still Little Bun and Air Dai. But Xiao Qing didn't have time to use the 2 crystals. Someone grabbed the crystals from her palm and swallowed them. This person was none other than Yan Hanqing, who was struggling to crawl over. The moment he swallowed the crystal, this unyielding man let out a blood-curdling scream. The surface of his body suddenly erupted with lightning, mixed with an earthy yellow color. Then, the surface of his skin instantly cracked, and blood instantly flowed out. Yan Hanqing struggled and threw himself at the monster. When the monster came into contact with the lightning on Yan Hanqing's body, it began to scream. Yan Hanqing immediately hugged the monster and rolled down the slope. Lightning flashed continuously. Xiao Qing stood up and staggered over. If she absorbed the crystals, she still had a chance to live. But if Yan Hanqing swallowed the crystals, he was just an ordinary person. Other than exploding, was there any other outcome? When Xiao Qing ran down the slope, Yan Hanqing and the monster were lying motionless in a depression. The monster's white bones had turned black. When Xiao Qing went to help Yan Hanqing, she accidentally touched the monster. It instantly turned into ashes, leaving only a black crystal lying in the ashes. When Xiao Qing touched Yan Hanqing, she was electrified. But she gritted her teeth and carried Yan Hanqing on her back. She picked up the crystals and walked up the slope. The slope was full of injured people. When Xiao Qing carried Yan Hanqing up the slope, she had no strength left. Her legs were weak and she knelt beside Air Dai. Then Xiao Qing helped Air Dai check his injuries. If he was alive, he would have died. Xiao Qing was very glad that Air Dai was a zombie. There was a circular hole in his abdomen. Through the hole, she could see the ground behind him. Air Dai looked at Xiao Qing with grievance. Obviously, his situation was not bad. Xiao Qing let out a sigh of relief. But the more serious thing was still to come. Xiao Qing looked at Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan expressionlessly. As you can see, Air Dai is a zombie. I am not a pure human. I was infected with a zombie virus when I was on the verge of death. Then I became like this. I am sorry to hide it from you for so long. Now you can leave. I need to use the off-road vehicle, or else I can't take the injured people away. You can take all the food in the car. Xiao Qing was very clear that not everyone could accept being with a zombie. Even if she was rational, everyone was afraid. What if she woke up in the middle of the night and lost her rationality and bit everyone? So even if Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan chose to leave, she would not blame them. After all, it was human nature. Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan looked at each other. After a long time, Gu Panpan bit her lips and said, "Sister Qing, I am sorry." Chapter 44. It's okay, I can understand. Xiao Qing smiled and slowly helped Yan Hanqing and Air Dai up. Gu Panpan and his sister didn't choose to fight because of their past relationship. No, Sister Qing. Gu Panpan suddenly got up. Her limbs were still weak, but she still walked over and helped Xiao Qing to help Yan Hanqing up. Gu Chuan also helped Little Bun and Xiao Tong up. Gu Panpan grinned, revealing her white teeth. Sister Qing, I thought about it and realized that even if you and Dumbo were both zombies, it wouldn't be something we can't accept. Even if something happens in the future, it doesn't matter. My brother and I are both psychics. We're not afraid of being bitten. You too. Xiao Qing couldn't help but look at the siblings. Their eyes were filled with sincerity, without the slightest bit of falsehood, nor was it a forced pretense. Gu Pan Pan and Gu Chuan really felt that even if they were zombies, they could accept it. It was only because they were them, not others. With such trust and care, was there a need for anything else to prove their friendship? Xiao Qing thought that she used to have Mu Lin, but now she had Gu Pan Pan and the others. She was really satisfied. God had taken away too many things from her. She had a beautiful childhood, healthy parents, and a complete family, but she was also given too much. Xiao Qing felt that she was already satisfied. What more could she ask for? After carrying the seriously injured into the car, Xiao Qing immediately drove back to the place where they stayed last night. When they were in the car, Yan Hanqing was already on the verge of dying. His skin had already turned purple. The thunder crystal was too overbearing. Even the earth crystal of the same level was gradually being forced out of his body. Now the surface of Yan Hanqing's body was constantly flashing with small lightning bolts, and there were horrible cracks like a spider web. Yan Hanqing's exposed skin was densely covered with small cracks. Yan Hanqing's clothes were dyed red with blood. Through those wounds, Xiao Qing could see the flesh and blood. Dai looked like he was more seriously injured. In fact, Yan Hanqing was the one who was dying. Dai was fine. After all, he didn't have a human body. His recovery ability was stronger. Ordinary physical injuries, unless it was a serious head injury, would not endanger his life. Yan Hanqing, on the other hand, was different. He was just an ordinary person and didn't even have any special abilities. However, he was able to swallow a level 2 thunder crystal without exploding in an instant. His body was already tough enough, but he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Xiao Qing bit her lip. She drove like a madwoman. The tires rubbed against the ground, almost bursting with sparks. Hold on a little longer. Just a little longer. Xiao Qing didn't know if she was talking to Yan Hanqing or herself. But God never liked it when things went too smoothly. Xiao Qing had just turned a corner when she saw a light black sedan speeding over from the end of the road. She immediately turned the steering wheel. But she didn't expect the other side to also want to dodge. Probably nervous, the other side also turned the steering wheel in the same direction. Then, the two cars collided without any suspense. Fortunately, both sides had already braked and reduced the speed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as simple as a collision. Xiao Qing's face almost hit the glass. She turned around and saw Yan Hanqing. Because of the violent turbulence, 2 streaks of red were slowly dripping from his nose. He has reached his limit. This thought flashed through Xiao Qing's mind like lightning. No, I have to find a safe place immediately and settle Yan Hanqing down. Only then can I think of a way. Chapter 45. But at that moment, 5 or 6 aggressive men got out of the car and knocked on Xiao Qing's window with steel pipes. Xiao Qing didn't want to waste any more time with them, so she rolled down the window and looked out with a poker face. Sorry, what kind of compensation do you want? One of the thin men saw the injured people through the window. His eyes brightened, and he poked the leader, whispering, "Boss, look." He pointed to the window. The leader's eyes also brightened, and he smiled obscenely. What compensation? Well, I want this car and everything in it. I won't touch the people, and they can leave, but... He pointed at Xiao Qing and Gu Pan Pan. You two have to stay and accompany us brothers. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. The 6 of us are all ability users. Xiao Qing's eyes became redder and redder. Gu Pan Pan wanted to teach them a lesson, but he was stopped by Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing opened the door and got out. She tilted her head slightly and smiled coldly. Say it again, what do you want? The leader said, Didn't I just say that I want to? Before he could finish his words, his eyes had already widened. The last thing he saw was Xiao Qing's face, which looked a little sinister after being splattered with blood. The people behind him only saw a white hand coming out of his back, and then the leader's body was torn in half. The beautiful woman came out of the rain of blood, looking like an Asura crawling out of hell. Those people were scared out of their wits. They had all experienced the turmoil of the apocalypse. What had they not seen before? But they were still frightened by Shao Qing. Only a chubby bespectacled man was the first to react. He quickly condensed an earth shield in front of him, but in the next second, the earth shield was easily shattered by the snow-white fist. Shao Qing, who was covered in blood, appeared in front of him with a strange smile. Then, she grabbed his neck. The next second, his head was separated from his body, and his head was twisted off by Shao Qing. The head with glasses rolled on the ground twice, and then it stopped moving. The other 4 people were scared by Shao Qing's brutality, and they ran away immediately. The thin man looked back and saw a huge flower head behind him, and then it opened its petals and swallowed him directly. He went in. The other 3 people saw it, and they immediately ran in 3 directions. Their meaning was very clear. "You are alone. Can you catch up with 3 people?" One of them was running, and then he saw a pair of legs in front of him, and then there was no more because he was punched in the head, and his neck was smashed. The last 2 people were probably the most pitiful, because they had run far away, and then they were dragged back by the vines. One of them looked back, and saw that his companion had been torn apart. He was scared to the point of peeing, and his legs were soft. He couldn't stop begging for mercy. Let me go, I know I was wrong, Shao Qing was too lazy to listen to him, and she stomped on his head. The ground was full of corpses, and no one was intact. Anyone who saw this scene would be disgusted and vomit. Shao Qing was expressionless, and they could only blame themselves for being unlucky. They ran into Shao Qing in this state, and their death was not in vain. "Shao Qing!" Gu Chuan grabbed the edge of the window, and shouted at Shao Qing with a serious expression. Shao Qing's body shook, and the red in her eyes slowly faded. She took a long breath, and the anxiety in her heart eased a little, and then she walked quickly to the car. Chapter 46. That night, Yan Hanqing's body began to rapidly transform into a zombie. However, it was unknown whether it was because of the thunder crystal in his body, but although the wounds on Yan Hanqing's body began to heal, it did not develop into a zombie's rapidly rotting body. Only his skin became more and more pale. One could even see the blue veins under his skin, and the occasional flash of lightning. Shao Qing came downstairs after taking a shower. She saw Yan Hanqing lying quietly on the bed, and Dai slowly recovering. Xiao Tong curled herself into a ball on the sofa, sleeping soundly. Only her psychic fluctuations told Shao Qing that she was also recovering. Shao Qing wanted to carry Xiao Tong upstairs, but she was afraid that she would trigger something and interfere with Xiao Tong's recovery. She gave up and quietly returned to her room. After returning, Shao Qing sat on the bed and released her vines. The vines were originally green in color, and even the barbs on them were green. But now, the vines looked green from afar, but if one looked closely, they would notice that there were dark green lines on them. Especially the barbs on the tip, there was a hint of black in the dark green color, which looked particularly scary. This was the change that occurred after she used the vines to isolate herself from the monster. It was as if the vines were infected by the monster's poison after being in contact with it for too long. As the owner of the vines, Shao Qing could feel the changes in the vines. In the past, although her vines had a little anesthetic toxin, it was very mild. Most of the time, she used it as a rope to tie people up. She originally thought that now that she was at level 2, she could go and tame a second plant. However, the vines gave her a pleasant surprise. Now, her vines had 2 more abilities. The first was rapid regeneration, which consumed her ability. The second was parasitism. Previously, she had used a parasitic ability to plant seeds in Mediterranean's body. But this time, the parasitism was much more useful. The small seeds were like bacteria, very difficult to detect. Also, after parasitizing a person, it was not like before where it would germinate. This time, it was controlled by Shao Qing, and it could sleep in a person's body for a long time. Once Shao Qing controlled the seeds to wake up, the rapidly growing seeds would inject poison into the person, corroding the person's internal organs. In the end, only the vines would be left in the person's stomach. This was undoubtedly a very scary ability. Of course, the most important thing was the poison. After the vines were infected with the monster's poison, they evolved. Although they could not completely lose control of the body like the monster, they inherited the monster's poison, which was especially corrosive and had some anesthetic effects. Xiao Qing immediately decided that before she reached level 3, she would not look for other plants to replace her vines. Also, Xiao Qing gave her vines a name, Ghost Vine, nicknamed Little Ghost. Although the battle made them hover on the edge of life and death, and they almost lost their lives, the harvest was also huge. Xiao Qing felt that she could break through to level 3 at any time. As long as she absorbed some more crystals, she could smoothly break through. However, now that she was surrounded by a group of seriously injured people, Xiao Qing did not dare to break through. Otherwise, if something happened to her during the process, wouldn't she be killed? After Xiao Qing recovered a little and studied the effects of the vines, she fed little Bun until he was full and left the room. Yan Hanqing still did not wake up. She suspected that the zombie poison was fighting with the thunder power in Yan Hanqing's body. If the thunder power won, the zombie poison would not be so terrible. Yan Hanqing was very likely to control this power and become a thunder power paranormal. After all, paranormals could not be infected. Of course, this was the best result. If the zombie poison won, Yan Hanqing would become a zombie. If he was lucky, he could keep his reason and thinking like Xiao Qing. If he was unlucky, he would become an ordinary zombie, only knowing hunger and eating flesh. Xiao Qing had prepared for the worst. Even if Yan Hanqing became that kind of zombie, Xiao Qing would raise him and feed him with crystals, hoping that when Yan Hanqing evolved to a high level, he would regain his reason. When she was in the base, she heard that after gradual exploration, people divided paranormals and zombies into 9 levels. The higher the level of zombies, the more flexible and smart they were. Level 2 and Level 3 zombies could already lead their companions to besiege human beings. They could retreat and ambush human beings. What if they evolved to Level 9? Would he be able to become like a normal person? Xiao Qing also knew that if zombies really evolved to the highest level, it would really be a disaster for human beings. After all, zombies' food was human beings. Even if they had wisdom, zombies would use their wisdom to hunt human beings instead of becoming good friends with human beings. It was just like how human beings would captive livestock for the purpose of eating them. If high-level zombies could disguise themselves and sneak into the base, like Xiao Qing, what would be a disaster for human beings? However, Xiao Qing didn't want to think about things that were so far away. Right now, she only hoped that Yan Hanqing could develop well. Gradually, Xiao Tong recovered. Air dye could also hang on Xiao Qing's body and act like a spoiled child. Gu Chuan and his sister also recovered. Only Yan Hanqing didn't wake up. On the morning of the 3rd day, when several people came out to eat, Yan Hanqing slowly sat up. Several people suddenly became vigilant. If Yan Hanqing became a zombie, they must first control Yan Hanqing to prevent him from hurting people. However, Yan Hanqing's first words after sitting up were, "I didn't die." Several people immediately relaxed. After all, zombies couldn't talk. However, Xiao Qing had to confirm again. She looked at Yan Hanqing. Yan Hanqing's skin was still showing a sense of death, but he looked no different from a normal person. His eyes and hands didn't change at all. Xiao Qing touched Yan Hanqing's chest. The thumping heartbeat beat against Xiao Qing's palm. The warm skin also told Xiao Qing that Yan Hanqing didn't become a zombie. An indescribable excitement reverberated in Xiao Qing's heart. She raised her head and wanted to say something, but then she saw that Yan Hanqing's face had turned red all the way to his earlobes. His body stiffened, and after a long time, he finally reacted and stuffed his naked body under the covers. Xiao Qing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yan Hanqing's clothes were already bloody and tattered. He definitely couldn't wear it. In the end, Gu Chuan provided a set of clothes for Yan Hanqing. Gu Chuan was shorter and thinner than Yan Hanqing. His clothes were tight on Yan Hanqing's body, outlining the outline of his muscles. This made Yan Hanqing feel helpless. Xiao Qing couldn't help but laugh. After laughing, her heart was satisfied. No matter what, they were all fine. This was already the best result. Chapter 47. Although it was a thrilling experience, fortunately, everyone was fine and their strength had improved. Among them, Yan Hanqing's injuries were the heaviest, but he also gained the most. He had a special ability, and it was the famous lightning ability. Originally, Yan Hanqing didn't say anything, but he felt inferior in his heart. After all, he was the only one without a special ability. He said that he wanted to repay Xiao Qing, but he couldn't do anything. Until now, he really had the ability to fulfill his promise. Dai, who was discovered, became more active. He ran and jumped in the forest, and used the bloody cloth to attract a lot of zombies. After that, he nimbly got into the car. Yan Hanqing quickly released his lightning ability. Suddenly, a large number of zombies were like epilepsy, twitching for a long time before lying down. Xiao Qing went forward and tried. She found that the zombies weren't dead yet, so she waited on the side. After a while, the zombies regained their ability to move. She and Gu Panpan quickly dealt with the zombies. After our experiment, we found that if there are 1 or 2 zombies, we can kill them in one hit. If there are too many of them, we can only make them temporarily lose their ability to move. Ordinary zombies will be affected for about 10 seconds, and level 2 zombies will only be restricted for 3 to 5 seconds. The zombies within 10 meters won't be able to escape, and the effect will be even worse if they are further away. Xiao Qing rationally analyzed, but Hanqing is only level 1 now. When his level increases, the corresponding power will also increase. Yan Hanqing didn't feel dispirited. After all, being able to have a special ability was already a great progress. He should be able to help Xiao Qing more as he slowly leveled up. Xiao Qing distributed the crystals to everyone, and then looked at the map. We will soon reach Hanqing's hometown. Let's eat something. There is a fork in the road ahead, so we won't stop to rest at noon. Xiao Qing didn't need to eat, so she was responsible for driving. The others ate in the back. Xiao Qing also fed Xiao Bao some food. There was a big river in front of them. The bridge across the river collapsed, blocking the road. Xiao Qing had to ask Yan Hanqing, "Is there any other way?" Yan Hanqing thought for a moment and said, "After passing the mountain in front, we will reach the cemetery in our village. It is said that the feng shui on the mountain is very good. Someone even rented the land in our village to build a cemetery. So, the road on the mountain should be able to walk." Xiao Qing nodded and turned the car directly into the mountain. The mountain road wasn't wide, just enough for one car to pass. If there was a car coming from the opposite direction, the wrong car wouldn't be able to pass. Xiao Qing didn't encounter anything along the way, and safely crossed the mountain. When she reached the other side of the mountain, she saw the cemetery that Yan Hanqing had mentioned. The location of the cemetery was next to the cemetery in their village. Later, it was contracted by someone, and the cemetery was built in the name of good feng shui. There were many people who came here to buy a cemetery. They were all rich people who wanted to bury their dead in a place with good feng shui. Because of the end of the world, this place was deserted. When Xiao Qing passed by the cemetery, she took a look. Many graves had been dug up, and there were white bones on the side. They were probably eaten by the beasts in the mountain. The construction of the cemetery was very grand, but the cemetery in Yan Hanqing's village was much colder. They were all small mounds, and the rows were not neat. Yan Hanqing quickly found his father's grave and knelt in front of it. "Father, I'm back." Yan Hanqing suddenly remembered that a long time ago, he had told his mother, "It doesn't matter, I will protect you on behalf of my father." However, he didn't do it. Yan Hanqing's mother's body was well preserved. Except for a layer of frost, it looked like she was still alive. Yen Hanqing dug the grave bit by bit with his bare hands. After nearly dying once, his body's tenacity and other aspects had become a lot stronger. Xiao Qing and the others didn't help Yen Hanqing. They just watched him dig up the grave, because everyone knew that Yen Hanqing needed to vent. This was the best way. There was only an urn in the coffin. Yen Hanqing put his mother in it, and then put the urn on his mother's chest. After looking at it for a long time, he slowly closed the coffin and buried it. Finally, Yen Hanqing knelt in front of the tombstone and used a military knife to carve his mother's name on the tombstone, side by side with his father's name. At that moment, Xiao Qing felt that Yen Hanqing's back had collapsed. She could imagine how Yen Hanqing had carried his mother on his back and struggled to survive in the end of the world. Finally, he saw hope, but his mother should be all his hope and motivation. That was why Yen Hanqing was so lost when he buried his mother. The lost Yen Hanqing looked at Xiao Qing, and then he slowly calmed down, as if he had a goal to live on. Xiao Qing always felt that people like Yen Hanqing lived too tirelessly. His whole life was lived for others. Thinking about it carefully, wasn't she the same? Wasn't it her family that supported her to live on? Let's go. Yen Hanqing looked at his palm. The fingertips that had been scraped by digging up the grave had already healed. That kind of strange recovery speed was almost comparable to air dye. Let's stay here for 2 days. Xiao Qing shook her head. I saw that many graves in the nearby cemetery were dug up, and the corpses were dragged out and eaten. I'm worried that there might be some beasts nearby. In case, we should stay and observe. Yen Hanqing looked at Xiao Qing and the others with some gratitude. He was a little embarrassed that they kept delaying because of him, but he wouldn't say thank you out loud. He would remember this friendship in his heart. Let's go to my house first, Yen Hanqing suggested. My house is just beside the village, so it's convenient to come and go. Okay. Xiao Qing nodded and led the group in the direction of Yen Hanqing's house. The single-story houses here were all in the courtyard, which was what the local dialect called the patio. They were covered with stainless steel covers, plastic films in winter, and gauze nets in summer to prevent mosquitoes, rain, and snow. Yen Hanqing's house was the same, so they couldn't climb the wall without the key. They could only open the door by force. Gu Panpan wanted to open the door by force, but she was stopped by Gu Chuan. He took a military knife and cut the lock. The house had been empty for a long time, so dust and cobwebs were everywhere. When the door was opened, the dust flew up arrogantly. The few of them covered their mouths and noses and walked in. Mom used to plant some vegetables in the courtyard, but we took them away when she left. Yen Hanqing recalled the past and smiled. They walked into the courtyard and saw a few wilted vegetables standing crookedly on the piece of land in the middle of the courtyard that had been set aside for planting. They actually grew again. Gu Ponpon's eyes widened, and she clapped her hands. Let's cook the vegetables tonight. Xiao Qing pushed open the door to the central room. Don't just focus on eating. Let's settle down and assign who to look after the cemetery tonight. Chapter 48. Then everyone looked at Air Dai in unison. Air Dai looked at the group of people in a daze. Something seemed wrong. Xiao Qing touched Air Dai's head and said, then it's decided. Then Air Dai was sold just like that. He was still in a daze. Xiao Qing immediately said, hurry up and cook. We'll start work after dinner. Yen Hanqing immediately went to cook. Xiao Qing looked at Air Dai, then at Yen Hanqing, and finally at Little Bun. She immediately felt that she was a winner in life. Before dinner was finished, Xiao Qing sat in the yard and watched Little Bun learn to walk with Xiao Tong's help. She suddenly felt that someone was sneakily peeping outside. Xiao Qing's vigilance immediately went up. Ever since the last incident, Xiao Qing felt like she was about to become a bird that was startled by the twang of a bough. She listened carefully. The breathing was heavy, and the footsteps were not well hidden. It was not a professional. It should be a living person. Xiao Qing thought carefully. Thin vines slowly crept out like snakes. After a while, there was a scream outside. Xiao Qing quickly kicked the door open. Then she saw two skinny people lying outside the door, tied up tightly by vines. The two people, a man and a woman, looked to be in their 40s or 50s. Their expressions were very frightened. Both of them were so thin that they looked like two skeletons. Don't kill us. The woman screamed and said in horror, I know Yan Honqing. That young man is Yan Honqing, right? Xiao Qing put down her raised hand silently. Who are you? Why are you sneaking around here? The man immediately said, We are residents of the village. In terms of seniority, Honqing has to call me uncle. The woman immediately echoed, Yes, yes. I saw you enter the village just now. I saw someone who looked like Honqing, so I came to have a look. I don't mean anything else. Xiao Qing narrowed her eyes slightly. She did not immediately believe their words. Instead, she immediately called Yan Honqing over. Yan Honqing had just finished cooking 2 dishes. He was still smelling of oil and smoke. He hurried over. What's wrong? When the two people saw Yan Honqing, they shouted happily, Nephew, it's me and your aunt. Yan Honqing's face was a little cold. However, he always looked serious, so ordinary people could not see it. Xiao Qing was always observant, so she could see that Yan Honqing's temperature had dropped at a glance. The two men were still shouting, Eldest nephew, hurry up and ask her to let us go. Don't forget that when your father died, we were the ones who helped your family. If it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have been able to grow up to this age. Yan Honqing looked at Xiao Qing awkwardly. Xiao Qing took back the vines. The two people got up and patted the dust off their bodies. The woman said, We're all on the same side. Is this my niece-in-law? She's so beautiful. Yan Honqing looked at Xiao Qing awkwardly, and then said, What's the matter? As soon as he said this, the woman's face sank. She smelled the aroma of food and said, Honqing, what do you mean? Don't you recognize your relatives at this time? Now your uncle and I are starving to death. Even if you don't remember that we're relatives, you have to remember that we helped you at that time, right? Yan Honqing pursed his lips. He was very embarrassed. Xiao Qing pulled him and said, Since you're Honqing's relatives, then come in. Although we don't have much food, we can still afford a meal. The two people immediately walked in happily. Xiao Qing greeted them in advance, and Dai hid in the house. Gu Panpan also brought out the dishes and some dry food. Yan Honqing returned to the kitchen and finished the unfinished dishes. Then the two people consciously sat down at the table. One of them took a few packs of compressed biscuits and stuffed them into his pocket. The other took a piece of biscuit and stuffed it into the woman's mouth while eating. They didn't even use chopsticks. They grabbed the food with their hands and stuffed it into their mouths. Especially the plate of bacon, which was eaten in a short while. When Yan Honqing came out with the dishes, he saw the two of them gobbling up the food on the table. His originally ugly face became even colder. When the woman saw Yan Honqing, she waved her hand. Honqing, hurry up and bring it over. The dishes are running out. Xiao Qing gave Yan Honqing a look. Yan Honqing silently brought the dishes to the table. The two people ate 4 servings of food. In the end, they patted their round bellies and didn't forget to stuff food into their pockets. Not to mention Yan Honqing, even the onlookers couldn't stand it. If it weren't for Xiao Qing stopping her, Gu Panpan would have mocked them. The woman was also thick-skinned. When she saw that there was nothing left on the table, she said, I'm sorry. It's all eaten. Did you cook less food? You are Honqing's relatives. It's nothing to eat some food, but we have to rest. Xiao Qing's intention to drive them away was very obvious. The woman didn't seem to hear it and kept looking into the room. Yan Honqing couldn't help but say, Auntie, the sun is going down. If there's anything, let's talk about it another day. No, what if you leave next day? Honqing, Auntie, I have something to discuss with you. Look, you came back from outside. You must have brought a lot of food, right? Your uncle and I helped you a lot in the past, didn't we? Just for the sake of returning the favor, you should give us a few bags of food, right? We don't ask for much. 12 bags will be enough. Don't tell us that you don't have any. How can such little food be compared to the food we saved in the past? Yan Hanqing lowered his voice and said, Auntie, I really don't have that much. The woman immediately opened her eyes wide. She was already skinny. When she opened her eyes, only a pair of gloomy eyes were left on her face. She looked even more horrifying. Without saying anything, she sat on the ground and began to cry. There's no justice. What kind of people are you? In the past, we didn't eat or drink. We starved and helped you. Now we're asking you for some food and you don't even give us. Have you eaten your heart? Yan Hanqing's expression was very stiff. He couldn't take out 12 bags of food. Even if he could, he wouldn't give it to her. Yan Hanqing's silence made the woman even worse. She cried and looked into the room. She didn't shed many tears, but her eyes were very sharp. I saw it all. What's that piled up in the corner? Chapter 49. In fact, Xiaoqing had already reached out her hand, but when she saw Dai's innocent eyes, she felt like she was touching an underage boy. She coughed and took her hand back. However, Dai didn't want to. He seemed to think that Xiaoqing didn't like him, so he took Xiaoqing's hand and put it on his thigh. Xiaoqing felt that she seemed to have led Dai astray. Seeing Xiaoqing take her hand back, Dai lowered his head slightly and lowered his eyelids. His long eyelashes fluttered, making him look very pitiful. Xiaoqing's heart softened at once. She hugged Dai to show that she still liked him very much. Dai was a little happier. Nothing happened that night. When Xiaoqing took Dai back, she happened to see the couple at the door. They were stopped by the man-eating flower she put at the door. When the couple saw Xiaoqing, they were surprised and said, Niece-in-law, quickly get rid of this strange flower. However, Xiaoqing and Dai didn't even look at them. They went straight into the house, which made the couple stomp their feet angrily. They stayed there for 3 days, but they didn't see any wild animals coming to dig the grave. However, the couple came almost every day, shouting that they wanted to see Yan Hanqing, but no one paid them any attention. On the 4th day, Xiaoqing said, Let's go. I need to verify something. Since Xiaoqing said so, no one objected. They packed up and were ready to leave. When they left, the couple came again. If you want to leave, take us with you. Even if you don't take us with you, leave some food. Yan Hanqing, you can't be so heartless. The woman stomped her feet and said. Xiaoqing put down the glass and poked her head out. What were you talking about just now? Her eyes suddenly turned a seductive dark red, and the angle of her smile was somewhat strange. Especially on her pale face, it seemed even more frightening. Little Baozi poked his head out from Xiaoqing's shoulder. His eyes were dark and hollow, and when he opened his mouth, his sharp canine teeth were exposed. The creepiness of the mother and son increased rapidly. The couple couldn't help but shudder. When they looked at Xiaoqing again, their eyes were full of fear. Satisfied, Xiaoqing retracted back into the car. She stepped on the accelerator and sped off. Only when they were far away from the village did Xiaoqing park the car in the woods. When night falls, I will go back with Hanqing to take a look. Pan Pan, you guys watch over the children. Gu Pan Pan asked worriedly, Should we bring my brother along? No, this trip won't be dangerous, but it might take a long time. I estimate that I will stay there for about 3 days. It will be more troublesome for you guys to take care of the children. Xiaoqing shook her head and closed her eyes to rest in the car. When the sun set, she got out of the car with Yan Hanqing. Dai insisted on following them, so they had no choice but to go with them. They quietly returned to the cemetery. The cemetery was surrounded by woods, so it was easy to hide. Shao Qing sat on a branch and said to Yan Hanqing, "Wait. At most 3 days, the results I want may come out." Yan Hanqing didn't say anything. He felt that his life already belonged to Shao Qing. No matter what Shao Qing said or did, he wouldn't raise any objections. Even if one day Shao Qing wanted to kill him, he would probably only stretch out his neck. Yan Hanqing was thinking. Suddenly he was pushed. Then he saw Dai grinning at him fiercely, and then squeezed between him and Shao Qing. The branch was thicker, so it was easy for 2 people to sit there, but it was very crowded for 3 people. Yan Hanqing was about to be pushed to the thinner part of the branch. Shao Qing had no choice but to hold Dai in her arms. Dai's body was slender, but thin. He fit perfectly in Shao Qing's arms, but his long legs were dangling. Fortunately, he was hanging in the air. Dai had a fierce look, but once he was held in Shao Qing's arms, the whole zombie became gentle and obedient. If zombies didn't blush, his ears might have turned red. "Don't move, or else we'll be the ones falling." Shao Qing couldn't help but tighten her arms around Dai's waist. Dai's thin waist was very nice to touch, but it was too little meat. Shao Qing couldn't help but sigh. If Dai was a normal teenager, she might not be able to control herself and become a beast. She would definitely feed Dai until he was white and fat. Every day, she would press him on the bed and eat him. After all, this was an obedient and handsome teenager who was dead set on her. The key word was teenager. That's right, as a girl with a boy toy, she had no principles. Dai didn't know Shao Qing's thoughts at all. If he knew, he would probably wash himself clean, strip naked, and climb onto Shao Qing's bed. Shao Qing, who felt that she still had some principles, remembered that there was still Yan Hanqing beside her. She coughed and pretended to be serious. "We have to pay attention to whether there's any movement." Yan Hanqing nodded and looked at the sky. The sun set very quickly. At the moment, there was no trace of sunlight. The dark clouds were like a black curtain, completely covering the moon. "I'll keep watch. You, have a good rest." "Let me do it. I'm not sleepy." "You should rest well. Nothing should happen tonight." Thanks to the strange body, Shao Qing's night vision became very strong. She sat on a tree branch and could even see the words on the tombstones at the edge of the cemetery. She couldn't see anything further. Yan Hanqing was very determined. "Let me do it. I've slept a lot these 2 days, so I don't feel like sleeping at night." Shao Qing thought about it and said, "How about this? I'll be in charge of the first half of the night, and you watch the second half of the night." Dai pulled Shao Qing's sleeve discontentedly. Shao Qing immediately changed her mind. "Dai and I will watch the first half of the night, and you watch the second half of the night." Dai was satisfied. Yan Hanqing also knew that with Shao Qing's temper, it was impossible for her to let him watch the whole night alone. So he nodded and leaned against the tree trunk to rest. At midnight, he could take over Shao Qing's shift. Sure enough, nothing happened for the first 2 days. Until the night of the 3rd day, 2 black figures suddenly appeared in the cemetery. Chapter 50. When the 2 shadows appeared, Yan Hanqing was about to take over the shift. The 3 of them were very awake. When they saw the strange shadows appear, the 3 of them quickly became alert. Shao Qing didn't say anything. She just made a hand gesture. Dai and Yan Hanqing immediately flanked them from the left and right. Shao Qing quietly crept closer and heard the conversation between the 2 of them. A woman's voice said, "Anyway, they have left. Why are we still here in the middle of the night? I feel a little scared. Why don't we come again tomorrow?" Immediately, another man's voice sounded, "Do you think we are doing something glamorous? Come in the day. Hurry up and dig and leave. Don't waste time. Who are you scolding? Don't talk about it. I think it's scary at night." The woman lowered her voice and said, "That slut seduced the village chief and took all the money. Not a cent fell into our hands. Now we are peeling her skin and gnawing on her bones. This is her retribution." The man laughed and said, "Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and dig. I haven't eaten meat for a long time. The graveyard next to us is also empty. We have to think about what to do in the future. That little turtle, when he left, he didn't leave us anything to eat. I think he is most likely a gigolo. Didn't you see how much he listened to that little girl? Like mother, like son." As soon as the woman's voice fell, Yen Hanqing couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up with red eyes and looked at the couple as if he was looking at dead people. The two of them were shocked. They raised the shovels in their hands, but when they saw that it was Yen Hanqing, they suddenly felt guilty. Big nephew, didn't you leave?" The woman stuttered. Yen Hanqing looked at the couple with cold eyes and said coldly, "If I leave, I'm afraid that even my mother's body will be ruined by you heartless things." Yen Hanqing had never cursed in his life, but this time, he really couldn't help it. To be honest, half of the blood in his body was the same as the man in front of him, but this person could be so cruel as to rob the money of the widow and the orphan. This money was the compensation for his father's death. Anyone with a bit of conscience wouldn't do such a thing. What's more, in the end, they didn't even plan to let go of his mother's corpse. Those filthy words made him burn with anger. Yen Hanqing had also thought that no matter what, this couple was his last family in this world. So even if they had done all kinds of bad things, Yen Hanqing was not prepared to deal with them. However, they had stepped on Yen Hanqing's bottom line. They shouldn't have done anything to Yen Hanqing's mother. "This is my mother's grave. I didn't want to see blood in front of her grave. I didn't want to let her live peacefully down there." Yen Hanqing seemed to be talking to himself. The man was trembling in fear. He knew very well that Yen Hanqing had been a soldier and had seen blood. If the couple went up together, they might even die. "Hanqing, what do you want to do?" "I'm your uncle." "Yes, Hanqing, what nonsense are you talking about? We're just here to add soil to your mother's grave." The woman hurriedly said. "It's very late." Xiaoqing quietly appeared not far behind Yen Hanqing and said faintly, "Hanqing, take dye and go back first. I'll take care of this." Yen Hanqing knew that Xiaoqing was worried that he would be traumatized if he did something to his family. So, she asked him to leave with dye and let Xiaoqing deal with these two people. However, Yen Hanqing shook his head and said faintly, "I'll do it." "What do you want to do?" The woman screamed. As her voice fell, the man suddenly stabbed the shovel into Yen Hanqing's neck. It seemed that he was going to make the first move. Xiaoqing didn't even look twice. She took Dai's hand and left. If he couldn't even deal with two ordinary people, was Yen Hanqing still the Yen Hanqing? She wasn't worried at all. After leaving the cemetery, Xiaoqing couldn't help but chuckle. They chose a good place. At least they won't die without a burial place. After about 2 minutes, Yen Hanqing came out. There was still the smell of blood on his body. It wasn't very strong, but to Xiaoqing, it was very clear. Dealt with. Xiaoqing turned around and saw Yen Hanqing silently take out a cigarette. After a long time, he couldn't find a lighter. In the end, he just held the cigarette between his fingers and didn't smoke. They don't deserve to be buried in the Yen family's ancestral grave. Yen Hanqing said coldly. He didn't say how he dealt with the two people. Xiaoqing also didn't ask. The three people strolled in the direction of the car. She knew that Yen Hanqing must be feeling bad. He was a very loyal and honest man. He was like a mountain, silent and reliable. This kind of man was usually very affectionate, whether it was family or kindness. Although the two people were not good, they were still his family in the end. They were his last family in this world. Xiaoqing knew that Yen Hanqing would be depressed for a while at most, and then he would bury everything in his heart. This man looked silent and cold, but in fact, he was already out of breath from the pressure. She could tell that Yen Hanqing did not smoke before. His smoking posture was clumsy and immature, and his knuckles did not have any traces of smoking due to years of smoking. He must have developed the habit of smoking after the apocalypse. This man had too many responsibilities. He wouldn't let himself relax. Xiao Qing always felt that she wasn't the kind of person who had a glib tongue. After meeting Yan Hanqing, she couldn't help but enlighten him again and again. "Are you still sad?" Yan Hanqing shook his head. There was some confusion in his eyes. Soon, when he looked at Xiao Qing, his eyes became clear. "I'm not that weak." Xiao Qing stared at Yan Hanqing for a while. She couldn't help but laugh. "I thought wrong. He was a soldier." He was indeed not as weak as she thought. Even if there was some depression, Yan Hanqing would never say it out loud. When you go back, you can register and officially become an authorized paranormal in the base. Then you can be assigned a place to live. Why don't you choose the room next to mine? After I killed that thing, it seems that the room is still empty. If you live next to me, we can take care of each other. Then I can take the baby to your house to eat." Xiao Qing said with a smile. Yan Hanqing nodded silently. Everything he had now was given to him by Xiao Qing. Everything he had now was also given to him by Xiao Qing. When Yan Hanqing didn't know what to think, suddenly a cold hand covered his eyes. Yan Hanqing could clearly hear Xiao Qing's voice with a slight smile. It was very pleasant to hear. "Did I tell you that? Your eyes are very beautiful." You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.